You're listening to the Alpha's Love Stories, romantic audiobooks that will make your heart race. Don't forget to subscribe for more enchanting love tales. Chapter 1: The empty throne. The air in the great hall tasted of polished stone and old magic. I arrived too early, a habit I couldn't break. In a world of thunderous wolves, I was a whisper, a misplaced breath in the grand story of the Valyrian pack. My worn boots were silent on the ancient flagstones as I entered the vast, empty chamber. My fingers tightened around the only thing of value I owned, my mother's leather-bound journal. Her final gift, her final words to me, spoken with a voice like rustling parchment, still haunted my quiet moments. "Lyanna," she had said, her eyes holding a galaxy of unsaid truths, "true strength is not about the roar that shakes the mountains. It is about the silence that holds the mountain together." I didn't understand it then. I'm not sure I understand it now. Today was the coronation of Caelan Thorne, the new Alpha King. My invitation, a crisp, official scroll delivered just 3 days prior, had been the first spark of hope in 2 long years. 2 years since the night of shattered moons, when the hunters came for my pack, the Silver Spring pack. 2 years of being Lyanna the ghost, the survivor, the healer's apprentice who jumped at shadows and spoke only when necessary. My wolf was a story for another time. A sad, silent story. The throne of the Alpha King stood alone on a raised stone dais, bathed in a shaft of morning light from the high stained glass windows. It was a formidable thing, carved from the heart of an ancient oak, with twin wolves for armrests, their amber eyes seeming to follow my every move. The hall was deserted, not a soul, only the dust motes danced in the sunbeams and the weight of centuries pressed down on the silence. I knew I shouldn't, but the throne called to me. It was a magnetic pull, a whisper in my blood I had never felt before. Before fear could anchor me, my feet were moving. I climbed the 3 smooth steps, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs, just for a moment, just to know how it feels to be unafraid, to belong. I turned and slowly, carefully lowered myself onto the throne. The wood was not cold. It held a residual warmth, a memory of all the powerful alphas who had sat here before. I placed my hands where theirs had rested, my mother's journal a comforting weight in my lap. For one stolen, breathless second, I closed my eyes. I imagined courage. I imagined a wolf within me that stood tall, not one that cowered. I imagined being seen. A deep, luxurious stretch rippled through my core, my wolf stirring from her long slumber in a way that made my breath catch. What was happening? The sound of the massive hall doors groaning open was like a thunderclap in the sacred silence. Heavy, purposeful footsteps echoed on the stone. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through my veins. I scrambled to stand, but it was too late. He filled the doorway, Caelan Thorne. I had only ever seen him from a distance, a silhouette of power and whispered legend. Up close he was more, taller, broader, his presence sucking the air from the vast room. His dark hair was tied back, emphasizing a face that was all sharp angles and restrained power. And his eyes, they found me instantly. They were the color of a winter storm, and they locked onto mine with an intensity that froze me in place. Time stopped. His gaze traveled from my wide, guilty eyes down to the throne I still occupied, and the temperature in the hall seemed to plunge. My voice was a trapped thing in my throat. I stumbled to my feet, my heel catching on the step. I would have fallen if he hadn't moved. 1 second he was at the door, the next he was right before me, his hand shooting out to grasp my arm, steadying me. The contact was electric. A jolt of heat and something wild, something ancient, raced up my arm. His scent enveloped me, snow-laden pine and dark, rich earth. I'm so sorry," I stammered, wrenching my arm back, my face burning. "The ceremony, I was early, you were just sitting on my throne." His voice was deep, quiet, and each word was precisely carved from ice. He didn't move away. He studied me as a hunter studies strange, unexpected prey. "Do you know the penalty?" he asked, his stormy eyes boring into mine. "For a wolf who dares to claim what belongs to an Alpha King?" My blood ran cold. This was it. My moment of foolishness had doomed me. I meant no disrespect, my king. I was only curious. "I'll go." I tried to step around him, a desperate, hopeless gesture. "Your name," it was not a request. "Lyanna," I whispered. "Lyanna Hayes. I'm the healer's apprentice for the Valyrian pack." A flicker of recognition in those storm-cloud eyes. Hayes. Of the Silver Spring massacre. The words were a physical blow. They ripped open the carefully stitched wounds in my soul. The screams, the smoke, the crushing silence afterward. I could only nod, my throat too tight for speech. Something shifted in his expression. The harsh line of his jaw softened, just barely. "You should not be here. This space is sealed until the elders arrive." "I understand. I'll leave immediately." I clutched my mother's journal like a shield. He still blocked my path. "You have not answered my question, Lyanna Hayes." Why were you sitting on my throne? The truth was pathetic. I was playing pretend. I was a lonely ghost seeking a moment of borrowed power. I looked down, my blonde hair a curtain between us. I wanted to feel it, I murmured, the confession dragged from me. The history, the legacy. I've had no place that was truly mine since I lost my pack. I suppose I wanted to understand what it feels like to have a foundation, to be unshakable. He was silent for a long moment, then he finally stepped aside. The ceremony begins in 1 hour. You may return then. Relief, sharp and sweet, washed over me. I hurried toward the door, my legs trembling. Liana, his voice stopped me cold. I turned. He had not taken the throne. He stood beside it, a king even without the crown, the morning light haloing his formidable frame. Yes, Alpha King, your mother, he said, and my heart stuttered. She was Alara Hayes, the Dreamwalker. How could he possibly know that? Yes, she was. I make it my duty to know the threads that weave through my territories, he said, answering my unspoken question. His gaze fell to the journal in my hands. Interesting that her particular gift did not manifest in you. A spark of defiance, faint but real, flickered in my chest. I lifted my chin a fraction. Not all gifts are visible, Alpha King. For the first time, the ghost of something touched his lips. Not a smile, something sharper, more assessing. No, he agreed softly. They are not. He took a step closer, his presence once again dominating the space between us. Tell me, healer. If you could sit on this throne again with all the power it represents, what would you do? The question was a test. I felt it in my bones. I thought of my mother's words about silence holding mountains together. I thought of the lost, the broken, the whispers in the dark that no one heard. I would use it to protect, I said, the words rising from a place of deep, certain truth. Not just the strong who can defend themselves, but the vulnerable at the edges, the ones whose voices have been stolen. I would make the foundation wider so no one would ever feel they had no place to stand. Something unreadable flashed in his winter storm eyes, a crack in the ice. It was there and gone in a heartbeat. You should go now, he said, his tone final. I didn't need to be told twice. I fled the great hall, my heart pounding a wild, chaotic rhythm against my ribs. I leaned against the cool stone wall of the corridor, trying to catch my breath. Nothing had changed. He was still the Alpha King. I was still the ghost, and yet I looked down at my mother's journal. I could still feel the phantom warmth of the throne beneath me, the electric shock of his grip on my arm. A strange, terrifying certainty settled in my stomach. This changed everything. A tremor had just shaken the foundation of my world. And I had no idea if it was the beginning of an avalanche or the first step onto solid ground. The hook was set, the game had begun, and I was utterly, completely in the dark. Chapter 2, The Crown and the Shadow. The ceremonial horn shattered the morning's fragile peace. 3 long, mournful notes that vibrated through the very stones of the castle, calling everyone to witness destiny. I stood in my assigned place among the healers, second row from the front, wearing my one good dress, a simple, cornflower blue that did nothing to hide how small I felt. Around me the great hall had transformed. It was now a sea of faces, furs, and finery. The air hummed with a low current of anticipation and thinly veiled ambition. Whispers slithered through the crowd like snakes. That's her, someone hissed behind me, the voice dripping with cruel curiosity. The ghost wolf, the one who survived Silver Spring. I stiffened, my fingers curling into fists at my sides. My mentor, Althea, the head healer of Valerian, shot a venomous glare over her shoulder, silencing the whispers momentarily. She leaned close to me, her silver-streaked black hair brushing my cheek. Remember your place, Liana, she murmured, her voice tight with a worry she couldn't hide. Eyes down during the oath-taking. Do not watch the Alpha King channel the ancestral power. It is forbidden for those not of the direct bloodline. I remember, I whispered back, my own voice barely audible, but how could I not look? The massive doors swung open. The procession began, elders in robes like faded shadows. Territorial alphas, proud and fierce, wearing their colors like battle flags, and then him. Kalen Thorne entered, and the very quality of the silence changed. It became heavier, sharper, charged. He wore no ostentatious crown, no heavy robes of state. Just dark, tailored trousers, a shirt the deep blue of a midnight sky, and a black leather jerkin etched with the ancient, swirling symbols of the Thorne bloodline. He needed no adornment. Authority radiated from him like heat from a forge. He moved with a predator's effortless grace, and his storm-gray eyes swept the assembly, missing nothing. His gaze passed over the healers section. Did it pause? For a fraction of a heartbeat did those winter storm eyes find mine. My breath hitched. I quickly looked down at my feet, my heart hammering a frantic warning against my ribs. The ceremony unfolded like a sacred play. The elders chanted the old laws. The alphas pledged their allegiance, their voices a rumble of subdued power. Through it all, Kalen stood before the throne, his throne as still and unmovable as the mountains beyond the castle walls. Then came the moment. Elder Moira, her voice thin but piercing, announced, "The time has come for the Alpha King to take his oath and receive the blessing of our ancestors." Kalen placed his palm upon the Alpha Stone, a slab of obsidian that was said to hold the whispers of every king who came before. I, Kalen Asher Thorne, by right of blood and strength of will, claim my place as Alpha King of the United Territories. His voice filled the hall, not with volume, but with profound, undeniable weight. I vow to protect our people, uphold our laws, and lead with the wisdom of the past and the courage for the future. As the final word left his lips, it happened. A wave of invisible energy erupted from the Alpha Stone. It washed over the hall, a warm, golden pressure that made the candle flames dip and dance. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The ancestral power was acknowledging him, and the response was stronger than anyone had seen in generations. I felt it differently. It wasn't just a wave passing over me. It was a key turning in a lock deep inside my soul. The energy didn't just touch me, it sang to me. A chorus of ancient voices, faint as echoes, filled my mind, words in a language I had never learned yet somehow understood. My skin prickled with 1,000 pins and needles. And beneath it, my wolf, she didn't just stir, she awoke. A surge of wild, unfamiliar power rose from the core of my being, swift and terrifying. It was not the gentle companion I'd known. This was something older, wiser, vast. It pushed against the confines of my control, yearning to answer the call of that ancient song. I swayed on my feet, a small, choked sound escaping my lips. "Liana," Althea's hand gripped my wrist, her fingers like iron. "What is wrong?" I don't know, I gasped, fighting to keep my feet to push the rising tide back down. The power before I could explain, Kalen's head snapped toward the healer's section. His eyes, wide with a shock he quickly masked, found mine. He felt it. He felt me. The connection was a live wire between us, visible only to our souls. He sensed the strange resonance between the ancestral magic and the dormant power shaking itself awake inside the quiet healer's apprentice. The moment broke as Elder Moira stepped forward with the ceremonial chalice. "Drink, Alpha King, and seal your bond with the essence of the first wolf." Kalen drank, never taking his eyes off me. A second, stronger pulse of power rocked the hall. This one was a physical blow. The whispers in my mind became a clamor. My vision swam with flecks of gold and shadow. My wolf howled, a soundless, desperate cry within the cage of my ribs. I clutched Althea's arm, my knees buckling. "The ancestors have spoken," Elder Moira cried, her voice triumphant. "Kalen Thorne is confirmed." The formal words were a distant buzz. I was drowning in a sea of inner turmoil. As the applause and cheers began, Kalen turned to face the crowd, the moment of our connection buried beneath his kingly mask. "As is our oldest tradition," Elder Moira announced, raising her hands for silence, "the new Alpha King may now select his ceremonial attendants, those who will stand as the pillars of his reign, extensions of his will in the world." A murmur of surprise. This tradition was archaic, almost forgotten. Kalen gave a single, solemn nod. "I claim this right," his voice boomed, clear and absolute. He named his brother Ronan as blood counsel. A tall, serious man with a kinder version of Kalen's face stepped forward to receive a silver armband. He named Merrick, a mountain of a warrior from the Stone Fang Pack, as war chief. Then a clever-looking woman named Lyra as diplomatic envoy. He paused. The hall held its breath. His stormy gaze swept the crowd, a calculated search, and finally it landed on me. "And Liana Hayes," he declared, his voice cutting through the sudden, deafening silence, "as my personal healer." The world dropped out from under me. No, he didn't, he couldn't. The silence was absolute, then exploded into a cacophony of shocked whispers. I stood frozen, a statue of disbelief. Althea's grip on my arm was painfully tight. "Liana," she breathed, her face pale. "Liana Hayes," Kalen repeated, an edge of impatience in his tone now. "Step forward." On legs made of water and fear, I moved. The walk to the dais was the longest of my life. Every eye was a weight, every whisper a lash. "Why her? The ghost wolf, she's just an apprentice." The words followed me, a toxic cloud. I stopped before him, drowning in the sheer force of his presence. "Alpha King," I managed, the title a dry leaf on my tongue. "Liana Hayes," he said for all to hear, "do you accept the position of personal healer to the Alpha King?" My mind screamed no. I was unqualified, unprepared, a lamb being led to a political slaughter. But my mouth, traitorously, remembered the warmth of the throne, the strange rightness of his earlier question, the song of the ancestors that had called to my soul. I accept the honor, Alpha King." The words felt both like a death sentence and a key to a long-locked door. He reached for the final silver armband, smaller and more delicate than the others. As his fingers brushed my skin to fasten it, the electric shock returned tenfold. A visible spark, tiny and blue, snapped between his skin and mine. He jerked his hand back minutely, his eyes flashing with stunned recognition. He felt it too. The band settled on my upper arm. It was warm, almost alive, its subtle pulse syncing with my runaway heartbeat. Kaelin's gaze held mine for a moment too long, a silent conversation passing between us in the span of a breath. "The selections are complete," Elder Moira proclaimed. "Let the feast commence." The spell broke. Noise and motion rushed back in. Kaelin was immediately swarmed by well-wishers and schemers. I stood alone at the base of the dais, adrift, touching the warm metal on my arm. A firm hand clasped my elbow. It was Ronan, Kaelin's brother. His eyes, a warmer gray than the Alpha King's, held a mixture of sympathy and deep calculation. "Come with me, Healer Hayes," he said quietly, steering me away from the crowd toward a side door. "There are things you need to understand and very little time to understand them." As he led me away, I glanced back. Across the teeming hall, through the gaps in the celebrating crowd, Kaelin Thorne watched me go. His expression was unreadable, but I knew with a chilling certainty that my quiet life was over. I had just been thrust onto the chessboard of kings and kingdoms. And I had no idea what piece I was supposed to be, or who was moving me. The game was in motion, and I was already in check. Chapter 3, The Weight of Silver. Ronan Thorne's study was a sanctuary of quiet intellect, a stark contrast to the roaring feast hall. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, and a fire crackled in a hearth carved with running wolves. The moment the heavy oak door shut behind us, the muffled celebration vanished, replaced by a silence that felt heavier. "Why me, Ronan?" The question burst from me, sharp with confusion and a rising panic. I didn't bother with titles. "Your brother has the finest healers in the territories at his command. Althea has forgotten more than I've ever learned." "I am nobody." Ronan moved to a sideboard, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. He handed one to me. I took it, my fingers trembling so the liquid shimmered. "My brother does nothing without reason, Liana Hayes. Especially not something as public and as controversial as this." "Then what is the reason?" I pressed, the warmth of the glass doing nothing to melt the ice in my veins. "Is it because of my mother, because I'm a Silver Spring survivor? Am I a pity appointment?" He sipped his drink, studying me over the rim. His gaze was shrewd, missing nothing. "It's because he sensed something in you. The same thing I sensed when I watched you heal my mate, Selene, last month." I blinked, thrown. Selene had come to the infirmary with a deep gash from training. It had been stubborn, refusing my usual poultices and stitching. In a moment of frustrated instinct, I'd done what my mother taught me in secret. I'd placed my hands over the wound and asked it to heal. I'd whispered to the torn flesh, coaxing it with images of wholeness. It had closed cleanly within hours. "I used standard techniques," I said, the lie brittle on my tongue. "You did not," Ronan stated softly. He set his glass down with a deliberate click. "You spoke to the wound, you convinced it." "That wasn't just healing, Liana, that was something older." The door opened before I could deny it. Kaelin entered and the room seemed to shrink. He had shed his ceremonial jerkin. In a simple black shirt he looked less like a king and more like a warrior, a dangerous one. The faint, freshly stitched line on his cheekbone was a stark reminder of our first encounter. "Leave us," he said to his brother, his voice flat. Ronan nodded. At the door he paused. "Remember the northern delegation, brother. Dawn approaches and with it their ultimatum." He left, closing the door with a sound of finality. I was alone with the Alpha King. The fire popped. The weight of his attention was a physical pressure. "You're wondering why I chose you," he said, circling me slowly. I felt like a specimen under a lens. "The question had crossed my mind," I replied, forcing my voice steady. "Your reaction during the ceremony." He stopped in front of me too close. "You felt the ancestral power." "Truly felt it. Everyone did, not like you." His voice dropped, taking on a low, resonant intensity. "Your wolf responded. I saw it, I felt it. That should not be possible for someone not of the direct royal bloodline." A chill that had nothing to do with the room seeped into my bones. "How could you possibly know what my wolf did?" "I am the Alpha King," he said, and the title was not arrogance but a simple, terrifying fact. "I sense every wolf in my territory, their strength, their loyalty, their secrets." He leaned in slightly. "Yours has been hiding." For a long time, I took an involuntary step back, my spine meeting the edge of his desk. "I don't know what you mean." "Your mother's journal." He ignored my protest. "What does it say about your bloodline, the Hayes line?" My hand flew to the bag at my side where the journal was safely tucked. "It's family history, healing lore. Nothing about your wolf, about what you are." The directness of the question stole my breath. I thought of the strange passages, the symbols I didn't understand, my mother's cryptic notes about the quiet ones and walking between. She believed my wolf was different, gentle. She called her a still-water wolf. Something ignited in his stormy eyes. Not gentle, still. There is a profound difference. He turned and walked to the fireplace, staring into the flames. When was the last time you shifted, Liana? The question was a dagger to my most guarded wound. I looked away, shame heating my cheeks. 2 years ago. The night my pack died, his silence was a command to continue. I was away, I whispered, the old grief rising like a bitter tide, studying with an elder healer in the next valley. I felt them die, each one, a thread snapping inside me one after another until there was nothing. My voice broke. I shifted, I ran all night, but when I got there was only ash and silence. My wolf, she retreated after that. She's there, but she won't come forward. Althea says it's a grief-stricken heart. He turned from the fire, his expression stark in the flickering light. Your wolf isn't retreating from grief, Liana. She's retreating from you, from the truth you refuse to face. That's not true. The denial was automatic, fierce, isn't it? He closed the distance between us again, his gaze piercing. The throne this morning, the ceremony. Your wolf responded to both. She recognizes what you deny. What are you saying? I'm saying your mother was right, but the name is wrong. You're not a Stillwater. He paused, letting the words hang in the air like a verdict. You are a Veil Walker, Liana, one of the ancient bloodlines. The last was recorded over 3 centuries ago. The term meant nothing to me, yet it resonated in my bones with the dull thud of truth. I don't know what that is. No, he agreed, frustration edging his voice. You don't, and that is the problem. He began to pace, a caged force of nature. The northern packs, the ones threatening to shatter my kingdom, they cling to the oldest traditions. They believe I've abandoned the deep magic, the old bonds for human convenience. I need a symbol, Liana, a living bridge to that forgotten past. The pieces crashed together with horrible clarity. So that's it, I'm a political symbol, a trophy of ancient blood to placate traditionalists. I need a healer who understands the old ways, he snapped, stopping his pacing to face me. But I don't understand them, yet you carry the journal of Alara Hayes, one of the last true seers. Your blood is pure old pack, even if your knowledge is not. He ran a hand through his dark hair, the gesture uncharacteristically agitated. Your healing of Ronan's mate, that wasn't standard technique, that was old magic, the kind the northern packs revere. The kind that could be the key to holding this kingdom together. Before I could process this, a sharp knock rattled the door. Dominic, the stone-faced head of the king's guard, entered without waiting for an answer. My king, the northern representatives, they are demanding an audience. Now. Alpha Jerk says if you refuse, they will view it as a final insult and withdraw to their mountains. Something dark and predatory flickered across Kaelin's face. The man vanished, replaced entirely by the Alpha King. Tell them I will be there in 5 minutes. Dominic nodded and left. Kaelin turned back to me, all business. This discussion is not over. Go to the feast, be seen tomorrow at dawn, be ready to travel to the capital. Bring only what is essential. Just like that, anger, hot and sudden, flushed through me. You append my entire life with a sentence. I expect you to honor the public commitment you made, he said, his voice granite. You manipulated me into that commitment? Yes, the admission was bald without apology. Because I need you, the kingdom needs what you represent. However unprepared you feel, the door opened again, the message was clear, our time was up. He moved to leave, then stopped on the threshold, his broad back to me. Your mother's journal, study it. You will need its wisdom in the days to come. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the silent study, the warm silver band on my arm feeling less like an honor and more like a chain. A symbol, a tool, a bridge. I was to be all these things, yet I felt more like a ghost than ever. But a new, stubborn ember glowed in my chest alongside the fear. He needed old magic, he needed a Veil Walker, then maybe, just maybe, it was time to learn what that truly meant. The path ahead was shrouded in mist and danger. But for the first time since the ashes of Silver Spring, I was being pushed to walk forward, and perhaps within my mother's cryptic pages I would find the map. Chapter 4, Whispers in the Garden of Glass. Dawn at Castle Thorn was a silent, silver affair. Mist clung to the manicured hedges of the healer's garden, a walled sanctuary of rare herbs and quiet beauty that adjoined my new quarters. I hadn't slept. The feast had been a blur of staring eyes and hissed questions. The silver armband felt like a brand. I sat on a dew-damp stone bench, my mother's journal open on my lap. The cryptic passage I'd found last night seemed to pulse on the page. The Veil Walker's sight is clearest in the between places. The hinge of dawn, the sigh of dusk, the breath between heartbeats. There the fabric of worlds grows thin, and one may listen to the whispers of what was and what may yet be. A between place. The garden at dawn certainly qualified. Closing my eyes, I tried to still the frantic whirl of my thoughts. I sought the silence between heartbeats as the journal instructed. At first there was only the chill air, the distant call of a waking bird. then slowly a new layer of perception unfolded. I didn't hear with my ears but with something deeper, the garden, it sang. Each plant had its own soft, vibrational hum, the peppery zest of the menderswort, the cool, blue chime of moonpetal, the deep, earthy drumbeat of the roots beneath the soil. And beneath that, fainter still, were the echoes. Whispers of the hands that had planted these seeds centuries ago, the hope and desperation of every healer who had ever walked these paths seeking a cure. My breath caught. This was the sight. This was listening to the world's soul. Fascinating, a gentle, aged voice observed. My eyes flew open. An elderly man stood at the arched entrance to the garden. He was tall and lean, with skin like polished mahogany and hair the color of fresh snow, swept back from a wise, lined face. He wore the simple, gray robes of a senior healer, but an air of immense, quiet authority surrounded him. Master Solon, I gasped, scrambling to my feet, the legendary court physician. Althea had spoken of him with reverence. He smiled, and the lines around his dark eyes deepened. At ease, child, I did not mean to intrude on your communion. He gestured to the space around me. The energy here, it bends toward you, like iron to a lodestone. I have not felt a presence like it since my own teacher, decades ago. You can see it, I whispered, awed. After 80 years serving Alpha Kings, one learns to see more than the physical. He stepped closer, his gaze falling to the open journal, then to the pendant I now wore openly over my dress, the silver wolf with sapphire eyes, his breath hitched just slightly. Ilara's pendant. And you are reading her grimoire. I wondered if it would ever find its way to the right hands. You knew my mother, we corresponded. She was a beacon of the old knowledge in a world growing dim to it. His expression grew solemn. She wrote to me of you before the end. She said a great divide was coming and that her daughter would stand in the center of it. A veil walker returned. The title no longer felt foreign, it felt like a name coming home. What does it mean, Master Solon? Truly, Kalen the Alpha King, he says it's about old magic. About being a bridge, Solon nodded slowly, moving to examine a cluster of starbloom flowers. It is that and more. Veil walkers are attuned to the fundamental energies of life and spirit. They heal not just the body but the tears in the fabric of a pack's spirit. They hear the memories in stone and the promises in seeds. In times of terrible division, they are the needle that can suture the wound. He looked back at me, his gaze piercing. But such a gift makes you a target, Liana. For those who fear the old ways and for those who wish to exploit them, the weight of his words settled on me. The northern packs, I said. Indeed, their leader Alpha Jerk is a hard man rooted in the deepest past. He would see you as either a sacred sign to obey or a heresy to be destroyed. There is no middle ground with such men, he sighed. Kalen has played a dangerous game by bringing you to the fore. He seeks to use your heritage as a key to unity, but a key can also turn a lock to seal a tomb. Before I could ask what he meant, the calm of the garden was shattered. The sound was distant at first, a raised voice, sharp and angry, rolling from the direction of the main courtyard. Then another voice, deeper, colder, responding. Kalen's voice. Solon's face tightened. The northern delegation. They have come early. We hurried from the garden, through the quiet halls of the healer's wing, and emerged onto a colonnade overlooking the main courtyard. Below, under a sky still streaked with pink and gold, a confrontation was brewing. Kalen stood at the top of the castle steps, Ronan and Merk a half-step behind him like pillars of support. Facing them, at the base of the stairs, was a group of 7 wolves. They wore heavy furs and leathers adorned with bones and iron, a stark contrast to the refined dress of the court. At their head was a man who could only be Alpha Jerk. He was almost as tall as Kalen, but broader, built like a bear. His hair was a wild, iron-gray mane, and his beard was braided with what looked like claws. His eyes, pale and fierce as a winter hawk's, swept over the gathered courtiers with disdain before fixing on Kalen. Your pretty words and human treaties mean nothing to the stone and snow, Jerk's voice boomed across the courtyard, echoing off the walls. You sit in your glass castle and forget the taste of true blood, the feel of the raw moon on your pelt. The North remembers its vows your father made. Do you honor them, boy king, or do you spit on his memory? The insult hung in the air. A collective gasp swept through the courtiers. Merk the war chief took an automatic step forward, a low growl in his throat. Kalen raised a single hand and Merk froze. My father's memory is not your weapon, Jerk. Kalen's voice was quieter than the northern alphas, but it cut through the morning air like a blade. He made vows to preserve our people, not chain them to a fading past. The world beyond the mountains does not sleep, it advances. We adapt or we are consumed. Adapt, Jerk spat the word. You mean surrender. You let their steel and their silent poisons into our lands. You let their weak blood dilute our lines. His burning gaze swept the crowd again and landed on me. I felt it like a physical shove. his pale eyes narrowed, zeroing in on the pendant at my throat, then the silver band on my arm. A strange, arrested expression crossed his rough face, shock, recognition, then a swift, calculating hunger. "And what is this?" he rumbled, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "You parade a new trinket before us, Thorn." A delicate little healer with a shiny bauble, he took a step up the staircase, his followers shifting ominously behind him. "That is no simple bauble. That is the mark of the veil, a relic of the old blood. Where did you find this, creature?" Kalen didn't look at me. His posture remained rigid, but I saw the tension coiling in his shoulders. "Liana Hayes is my appointed personal healer. Her heritage is her own. It does not concern this council. Does it not?" Jerk let out a harsh bark of laughter. "You are either a fool or a liar." A Veilwalker appears for the first time in centuries at the moment our alliance frays. This is no accident, this is a sign, but for whom? He stared directly at me now, his gaze stripping me bare. "Tell me, girl, do you hear the ancestors? Do you walk the line between worlds? Or are you a pretty fraud, planted by this king to sway the superstitious?" Every eye in the courtyard turned to me. My mouth went dry. I felt Master Salon's reassuring presence at my back, a subtle pressure. I remembered the whispers in the garden. I straightened my spine, pushing down the terror. "I am Liana Hayes of Silver Spring," I said, my voice clear and carrying in the sudden silence, though it trembled slightly. "I am a healer. The rest is still revealing itself to me." Jerk studied me for a long, agonizing moment. The hunger in his eyes didn't fade, it intensified. He saw me not as a person but as a thing, a key, just as Salon had said. "The North will consider this development," he announced suddenly, turning his back on me as if I were of no further interest. He addressed Kalen once more. "We will attend your council today, Thorn. But know this, the sight of the old blood changes nothing of our demands, it only makes the stakes clearer. We will have our answer by the full moon, a true answer. Written in blood if need be." With that, he and his warriors turned and stalked from the courtyard, their departure as abrupt and violent as their arrival. The silence they left behind was thick and trembling. Slowly the court began to murmur again, the sounds anxious, speculative. Kalen finally turned his head, his stormy eyes found mine across the crowded space. In them I saw no reassurance, no apology, only a grim acknowledgement. The game had escalated, Jerk knew what I was, and now I was not just a symbol for Kalen's use, I was a prize. And in the brutal game of alphas, prizes are fought over or shattered. The hook was no longer just set, it was buried deep, and I was dangling from the line, suspended over a chasm I was only beginning to see. The whispers of the garden were gone, replaced by the deafening roar of politics in peril. Chapter 5. The Council of Knives. The council chamber was a masterpiece of intimidation. A perfect circle of polished black marble, with a ceiling so high it vanished into shadow. A ring of narrow windows like arrow slits cast bars of cold white light across the central table, a massive disk of obsidian etched with a map of the United Territories. There were no chairs, everyone stood. I stood to Kalen's left as his personal healer, my place now cemented by the silver band and the morning spectacle. Ronan was on his right, then Merc, then Lyra. Across the vast, dark table stood Alpha Jerk and his 6 northern alphas, a wall of fur, leather, and simmering hostility. The rest of the room was filled with territorial representatives, court officials, and elders, a silent audience to a play that could end in war. The air was so thick with tension I could barely draw breath. The scent was a clash, Kalen's clean snow and pine against Jerk's aroma of wood smoke, iron, and wet stone. "Let this council come to order," Elder Moira intoned, her voice the only soft thing in the room. "Alpha King Kalen Thorn presides. The matter, the formal grievances of the Northern Coalition led by Alpha Jerk of the Frostfang Pack." Jerk didn't wait for permission. He slammed a fist on the obsidian table, the sound like a cracking glacier. "Grievances? You speak as if we complain about spoiled meat, we speak of survival. Of soul." He leaned forward, his pale eyes blazing. "Your father, Thorn, promised us sovereignty in our mountains. He promised the old laws would be our shield. What do we see now? Human trade routes cutting through our sacred hunting grounds. Mixed blood pups raised in your court, taught to be ashamed of their wolf. You dismantle the bloodline hierarchies that have kept us strong for 1,000 years. Kalen listened, his face a mask of carved stone. When Jerk finished, spittle flecking his beard, the silence was absolute. "My father," Kalen began, his voice lethally calm, "promised to preserve our people. The world that allowed for isolated sovereignty is gone, Jerk. The hunters who wiped out the Silver Spring Pack did not ask for their bloodline charts. They see only wolf. Our strength now lies in unity." "In adaptation is a slow death," snarled a younger northern alpha, a woman with a scar across her lips. "You ask us to become shadows of ourselves." To bargain with the creatures who would wipe us from the earth, better to bargain from a position of united strength than to be picked off one isolated pack at a time, Ronan shot back, his usual calm fraying. The Silver Spring Massacre is not an outlier, it is a warning. At the mention of my pack, every eye flicked to me. I felt the weight of their stares, pity, curiosity, disdain. Jarek's gaze was different, it was acquisitive. The Silver Spring tragedy, Jarek said slowly, deliberately turning the conversation like a spear point toward me, was a failure of weak leadership. A pack grown soft, too close to human borders. His eyes pinned me. Is that not so, Healer Hayes? You were there. Did your alpha not grow complacent? The question was a trap coated in venom. It demanded I betray my dead alpha's memory or agree with this brute. Grief and anger warred in my throat. Kalen shifted slightly, a silent warning. I was not at the hearth when the flame was extinguished, I said, choosing my words with care, my voice surprisingly steady. I only arrived to ashes. I cannot speak to my alpha's strategies. I can only speak to the result that strength without wisdom is a hollow tree and it will fall. A murmur rippled through the room. It was not the answer Jarek wanted. His jaw tightened. Pretty words from a pretty healer, he sneered, dismissing me. He looked back at Kalen. We are not here for poetry, Thorn. Our demands stand. Autonomy, restoration of the blood laws, a ban on human technology within a day's run of our borders. And, he added, his voice dropping to a gravelly threat, the Veil Walker. The chamber went dead silent. The word hung in the air, tangible as smoke. Kalen went very still. Explain, Jarek spread his hands, a mocking gesture. If the old ways are so precious to you, prove it. The Veil Walker is a living piece of our deepest past. Let her come north. Let the shamans of the Frostfang examine her, learn from her. Let her blessing reinforce the traditional bonds you claim to uphold. Her place is with those who still honor what she represents. My blood turned to ice, to be handed over to Jarek as a curiosity, a relic to be studied. It was a death sentence of a different kind. She is my sworn healer, Kalen said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Her place is here. Then you admit it, Jarek crowed, striking the table again. You do not value the old ways. You hoard the symbol for your own power but refuse to let it serve the people it was meant for. This is the heart of your betrayal. The Northern Alphas growled in unison, a low, menacing sound that vibrated in the marble floor. Merrick and the other royal guards tensed, hands drifting toward weapons. Enough, Kalen's voice cracked through the chamber like a whip, infused with a pulse of alpha command that made my knees weak. The growling ceased. You speak of the old ways, Jarek, then let us settle this by an old way. A way that tests not just strength but worthiness. Jarek eyed him suspiciously. What way? The trial of the sundered moon. Gasps, genuine and shocked, echoed around the room. Even Elder Moira looked alarmed. Ronan shot his brother a glance of pure dismay. That trial has not been invoked in 500 years, Jarek breathed, but a fierce, eager light entered his eyes. It is a death sentence for the unworthy. It is a test for those who would lead all wolves, Kalen corrected. A champion from the north, a champion from the crown. They enter the sacred caves beneath this mountain at moonrise. They must navigate the labyrinth of echoes, face what the ancestors set before them, and return with the moonstone shard before the next moonrise. If they succeed, it is a sign of ancestral favor for their cause. And if they fail, Jarek pressed, leaning forward hungrily. If they fail, Kalen said, his gaze sweeping the room before landing with terrible weight on me, they do not return at all. The finality of the words chilled my soul. This was madness, and the champions, Jarek asked, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Who will you send, Thorn, your war chief, your brother? Kalen's eyes never left mine. There was an apology in them and a desperate, unwavering resolve. The trial requires balance. Strength paired with spirit, a warrior's body and a healer's soul. He paused, letting the awful understanding dawn on everyone. I name my champion Liana Hayes. The uproar was instantaneous. Shouts of protest, cries of disbelief. Ronan looked stricken. Merrick roared, my king, no. She is not a warrior, it is slaughter. Jarek threw his head back and laughed, a raw, triumphant sound. You sacrifice your own pawn, Thorn, a clever, cowardly move, very well. The North names our champion, Bjorn the Iron Tooth. He gestured to a monstrous man beside him, all muscle and scar tissue with filed teeth that gleamed in the slitted light. Bjorn grinned, a horrifying sight, and cracked his knuckles, the sound like breaking bones. He looked at me as if I were a rabbit. Then it is set, Kalen said, silencing the chaos once more with his voice. Moonrise tonight, the trial of the sundered moon will decide the fate of the North. The council dissolved into frantic, buzzing argument. I stood frozen, the noise a distant roar in my ears. Kalen turned to me, his face grim. People swirled around us, but we were an island of dreadful silence. They will kill me in there, I whispered, the truth a stone in my stomach. No, he said, his voice low and fierce for my ears only. They will try, but the labyrinth does not test muscle alone, Liana. It tests truth, it tests the heart. Your mother's journal, there is a map, there is a way, you must find it. He believed in this. He was gambling his kingdom and my life on the pages of a dead woman's book and a legend. Bjorn will rip me apart before I read a single page, I said, despair clawing at me. Kalen leaned closer, his stormy eyes holding mine captive. Then you must not let him find you, you must be smarter, you must listen, you are a veil walker, the labyrinth is the ultimate between place. It is made for you, now, he said, straightening, his voice taking on the formal tone of a king. You have until dusk to prepare. Master Salon will provide you with what you need. He turned and walked away, swallowed by the crowd of advisors and anxious nobles. I was left alone in the throng, the marked lamb, the sacrificial healer. The northern champion, a monster named Bjorn, caught my eye from across the room. He drew a finger slowly across his throat, his filed teeth glinting. The hook was no longer buried in me. I had been thrown into the abyss. The trial of the sundered moon awaited, a place from which, they said, the unworthy did not return, and I had only hours to learn how to be worthy. The whispers of the garden were a faint memory. Now I had to listen to the echoes of a labyrinth or become one of them forever. Chapter 6 Whispers on parchment. The hours until dusk bled away like sand through a clenched fist. I was given a small, windowless chamber adjacent to the royal armory to prepare. It smelled of oil, metal, and fear, my own. Master Salon entered, carrying a pack and a look of profound sorrow. Here, he said, his voice gentle as he set the pack on a wooden table. Practical things, a waterskin, dried meat and fruit, chalk for marking, a coil of strong, thin rope, and this. He drew out a small, wax-sealed vial containing a luminescent blue paste, moon moss salve. It will glow in absolute dark and it can seal a wound in moments, use it sparingly. I stared at the supplies, my mind numb. They were tools for a journey, not for a battle. He's sending me to die, Master Salon, I whispered, the words hollow. He is sending you to prove, Salon corrected firmly. He pulled up a stool and sat before me, taking my cold hands in his warm, wrinkled ones. Kalen is many things, ruthless, calculating, burdened, but he is not a fool. He sees something in you even you do not. The trial of the sundered moon, it is not a simple maze. It is a living memory of our kind. Its paths shift, its challenges are psychological, it reflects what you bring into it. Bjorn will bring fists and teeth, I said, a tremor in my voice. What do I bring? A journal and some salve? You bring a legacy, Salon insisted. He tapped the leather cover of my mother's book, which lay between us. Now, we have little time, the map, you must find it. I opened the journal, my fingers fumbling. We flipped past familiar passages on herb lore and healing chants. Then near the middle we found a series of pages that seemed different. The paper was thicker, older. The ink was not my mother's flowing script but a spidery ancient hand, and it wasn't writing, it was a maze. A labyrinthine circle, exquisitely detailed, filled with tiny, cryptic symbols. At its center was a star, at its entrance a crescent moon, and along the twisting pathways small notes were scribbled in my mother's hand. The first echo listens for fear, I read aloud, my voice trembling. Stand still and tell it your truth, the path of weeping stone remembers grief. Do not drink the tears, the chamber of whispers will show you what you seek and what seeks you. Salon traced the lines with a reverent finger. It is the labyrinth, she must have copied this from some older source. Perhaps the original grimoire of the Veil Walkers. He pointed to a junction where three paths seemed to merge. Here, the fork of choices, the note says the warrior will take the wide path, the walker must take the narrow where the stone sighs, you must remember that. Bjorn will choose strength, you must choose perception. A new, chilling thought occurred to me. Master Salon, if my mother had this map, did she know I would face this? He met my gaze, his old eyes full of an unutterable sadness. Ilara had the sight, child, in flashes. She knew a great trial would come for her daughter. She prepared this journal as a shield, as a guide. She could not stop the trial, but she could arm you for it. He squeezed my hands. She believed you could walk where others would fall. The weight of that belief was heavier than any pack. What if I'm not what she believed? What if I'm just Liana, scared and ordinary? Then the labyrinth will show you otherwise, he said softly, or it will be your tomb. There is no middle ground. The door opened without a knock. Kalen stood there, a dark silhouette against the torchlight of the corridor. He had changed into practical, dark clothing. In his hand was a slender, sheathed dagger. Its hilt was wrapped in worn leather, and its pommel was a smooth, gray stone that seemed to absorb the light. Leave us, Master Salon, Kalen said, his voice quiet. Salon gave my hands a final squeeze, rose, and left, closing the door behind him. Kalen approached and placed the dagger on the table next to the journal. It is not for fighting, Bjorn, he said, preempting my question. You will not win that fight. It is for cutting rope, for prying, for protection against other things. The stone in the pommel is from the heart of the labyrinth. It will grow warm when ancestral magic is near. A compass of sorts. I looked from the dagger to his face. The stern mask was there, but beneath it I saw the ghost of that same desperate resolve from the council. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, the question bursting from me. "You could have chosen Merc. You could have chosen anyone with actual skill." "This isn't strategy, this is a sacrifice." For a long moment he was silent, then he did something astonishing. He pulled up Salon's stool and sat down, bringing his eyes level with mine. The Alpha King was gone. In his place was just Kalen, a man carrying a mountain on his shoulders. "When you sat on my throne," he began, his voice low and rough, "you said you wanted to feel what it was like to be unshakable. Do you remember what I felt in that moment?" I shook my head mute. "I felt the throne recognize you." The admission seemed to cost him. The amber eyes of the carved wolves, they glowed, Liana, faintly, for just a second. "A throne that has known 100 Alpha Kings did not reject you, it acknowledged you." My breath caught. I had felt the warmth, the rightness, but I had seen no glow. "The ancestral power in the ceremony," he continued, "it didn't just flow through you, it answered you, you called to it and it responded. That has never happened, not with any royal, not with any elder." He leaned forward, his stormy eyes blazing with intensity. "You are not a symbol I am using. You are a force I do not understand, and in a war for the soul of our people, I cannot afford to ignore a force I do not understand. The labyrinth will force understanding, for you and for me, and if the understanding is that I am weak, that I die in the dark, then," he said, the words stark and terrible, "the ancestors have chosen our path, and it is a path of blood and division, and I will bear the weight of your death every day until I join you." He stood up abruptly, the moment of vulnerability vanishing like mist. "The map. Study it, remember, the labyrinth tests truth. Bjorn's truth is rage and domination. What is yours?" He turned to leave. "What if I don't know my truth?" I called after him, my voice small. He paused at the door, his back to me. "Then you will find it. Or it will find you." He glanced back, his profile sharp in the dim light. "Moonrise is in 1 hour, I will be at the entrance, do not be late." The door shut, leaving me alone with the ghost of his confession and the whispering pages of my mother's journal. The throne had glowed for me. The power had answered me. These were not the facts of a scared healer's apprentice, they were the fragments of a different story. I looked down at the map, at the tiny, precise lines. I traced the path from the crescent moon entrance to the central star. The warrior will take the wide path. The walker must take the narrow where the stone sighs. My truth, what was my truth? I thought of Silver Spring, not of the end but of the before, of my mother humming as she mixed herbs, of my father's laugh echoing in the pine trees, of the feeling of my wolf not as a separate, timid thing but as a part of me running free under the moon. My truth was not that I was weak. My truth was that I had been afraid of the power that had flickered in me the night my world burned. Afraid of becoming something my gentle mother could not explain. I had buried my wolf not out of grief but out of terror of what we might become together. I closed the journal. I slipped the dagger into my belt. I shouldered the pack. I was not just Liana Hayes, the ghost wolf, anymore. I was the map reader, the daughter of a seer, the one the throne had recognized, the truth seeker, and I would walk into the sighing stone. The hook was in my own heart now, pulling me toward a destiny I could no longer outrun. The labyrinth awaited, not with a monster's roar, but with a question. And for the first time I was desperate to hear it. Chapter 7, The Sighing Stone. The entrance to the labyrinth of echoes was not a grand archway, but a wound in the earth. A jagged fissure in the side of the mountain upon which Castle Thorn was built, hidden behind a waterfall that thundered into a black pool. The air was thick with spray and the roar of falling water, a constant, deafening prelude to the silence of the depths. Torches flickered, casting wild, dancing shadows on the slick rock faces. A somber crowd had gathered, Kalen and his inner circle on one side, Jerk and his northern wolves on the other. The mood was funereal, not festive. Bjorn stood apart, a monument of menace. He wore only leather breeches and a vest, his muscled torso a roadmap of old violence. He cracked his neck, his filed teeth bared in a permanent, hungry smirk as he watched me approach. In his hand was not a ceremonial dagger but a brutal, short-hafted axe. Kalen stepped forward. He wore his kingly mask once more, impenetrable. "The trial of the sundered moon begins at moonrise," he announced, his voice cutting through the waterfall's roar. "Two enter. The one who returns with the moonstone shard before the next moonrise proves the favor of the ancestors for their cause. Any who interfere forfeit the trial and their honor." His eyes met mine, a fleeting, unreadable glance. "Enter." Bjorn didn't hesitate. With a guttural sound, he shouldered past me and vanished into the black fissure, swallowed by the darkness. My legs felt rooted to the stone. The pack was heavy. The dagger at my belt felt like a toy, the map in my mind was already blurring. Remember the sighing stone, Liana. The whisper was so faint I thought I imagined it, but Ronan, standing just behind Kaelin, gave me the barest, almost imperceptible nod. He had heard Salon's briefing. I took a shuddering breath, the damp air filling my lungs. I could not look at Kaelin again. If I did, I would run. Instead, I focused on the fissure, a mouth of stone waiting to close. I tightened the strap of my pack and walked into the dark. The roar of the waterfall died instantly, replaced by a profound, suffocating silence. It was not an absence of sound, but a presence of stillness so complete it pressed against my eardrums. The air was cool, dry, and carried a faint, mineral scent. Light from the entrance faded within 10 paces, plunging me into absolute blackness. I fumbled in my pack, my fingers finding the vial of moon moss salve. I smeared a tiny dab on the back of my hand. It emitted a soft, ethereal blue glow, just enough to illuminate my immediate surroundings, a rough, tubular tunnel stretching downward. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm. Bjorn is already ahead. He is faster, stronger. He will find the shard and be waiting for me at the exit to finish it. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. I forced myself to stand still, to breathe. I closed my eyes in the darkness. I listened not with my ears but with the new sense the Veil Walker sense. At first nothing, then a vibration, not a sound but a feeling in the stone beneath my feet. A deep, slow, rhythmic pulse, the heartbeat of the mountain, and woven through it whispers, not words but emotions, ancient fear, determination, triumph, despair, the echoes of every soul who had ever walked here. My mother's note, the first echo listens for fear. I am afraid, I whispered aloud, the confession swallowed by the hungry silence. I am terrified of the dark, I am terrified of Bjorn, I am terrified of what I might be. The moment the words left my lips, the tunnel ahead changed. The blue glow of my salve reflected off something new. The walls shimmered, and for a second I saw not rock but shifting images, flames, running wolves, my mother's face. The echo was showing me my fears. But I am more than my fear, I said, stronger now, speaking to the mountain itself. I am Liana Hayes, I am a healer, I carry my mother's legacy, and I will walk this path. The images faded. The tunnel was just a tunnel again, but the oppressive, fearful weight in the air lightened just a fraction. I had passed the first test. I moved forward, using the salve light to guide me. The tunnel branched. One path was wide, smooth, sloping invitingly downward. The other was a narrow crack, barely wide enough for me to sidle through. The warrior will take the wide path. I slipped into the narrow crack. The stone was cold and close, scraping against my shoulders. I inched forward for what felt like an eternity. Then I heard it, a sound so soft it was more vibration than noise, a long, low exhalation like a sleeping giant's sigh, where the stone sighs. I was in the right place. The crack opened abruptly into a cavern. My salve light didn't reach the ceiling, but it glimmered on a startling sight. The floor was a shallow pool of perfectly still, black water. And rising from it were dozens of slender stalagmites that looked uncannily like figures, weeping figures, their stone faces tilted downward, with droplets of water eternally forming and falling from their eyes into the pool. The path of weeping stone remembers grief. Do not drink the tears. The path continued on the other side of the pool. I could wade through. The water looked shallow, but the warning was clear. I looked for another way. There was none. As I stood there, the whispers in the stone grew stronger. Not emotions this time, but fragments of thought, of memory. My pup taken by the frost, the treaty broken, our honor ash. I failed them all. I should have died. The grief in the cavern was a tangible mist, seeping into my skin, pulling at my own sorrow, the ashes of Silver Spring, my mother's empty chair, the lonely 2 years as a ghost. A powerful, seductive urge washed over me, to kneel, to drink from the pool of collected tears, to share the burden, to drown in communal sorrow. My hand trembled, reaching toward the dark water. Do not drink the tears. I snatched my hand back. This was not healing, this was surrender. To drink was to accept that grief was the only truth. I remember my loss, I said to the weeping stones, my voice echoing strangely. I carry it with me, but I will not let it be the water I swim in. I took a step back from the pool's edge. I would not wade through grief. There had to be another way. I examined the walls. They were smooth, impossible to climb. My eyes fell on the stone weepers themselves. They were close together. Their shoulders, their bowed heads, could they be stepping stones? It was madness. They were slick with condensation. One slip and I would fall into the tear-filled pool, but it was the only path. Holding my breath, I placed a foot on the base of the nearest stone figure. It held. I transferred my weight, my arms wheeling for balance. I stepped to the next and the next, moving from sorrow to sorrow, a fragile bridge over an ocean of grief. The whispers grew frantic, desperate, trying to pull me down into their despair. Halfway across, my foot slipped. I cried out, my arms flailing. I fell forward, not into the water but against the cold stone chest of a weeper. I clung to it, my heart in my throat. The salve light flickered wildly. The stone beneath my cheek was not just cold, it was warm in one spot, a hand-shaped depression worn smooth by time. On instinct, I placed my own hand over it. A single, clear memory flooded me, not of grief but of love. A warrior leaving this same cavern centuries ago, her hand on this spot, thinking of the mate waiting for her outside, her determination to return, her love as her anchor. The memory filled me with sudden, borrowed strength. I pushed myself upright, found my balance, and finished crossing the stone figures. On the other side, I collapsed for a moment, shaking. I had not drunk the tears. I had walked through sorrow without letting it consume me. I stood ready to move on. That's when I heard it, not a whisper, not a sigh, a heavy, rhythmic splash coming from the wide tunnel entrance on the far side of the cavern. Someone was wading through the pool of tears. Bjorn. He emerged from the water, dripping, his face a mask of fury. The grief whispers seemed to writhe around him, but he shook them off like water, his brute force will overpowering the subtle magic. He hadn't taken the stone path. He had simply barreled through the pool, defiling it. His pale eyes found me in the faint blue glow. The hungry smirk returned, wider now. "Little healer," he rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. "You took the scenic route, I took the short cut, now we take the fun way out." He hefted his axe and began to advance around the pool's edge. He was between me and the only exit. The Chamber of Whispers was ahead, according to the map, but I would never reach it. The first test was truth, the second was grief, the third, it seemed, was survival, and the echo of his axe dragging on stone was the only whisper that mattered now. The labyrinth had brought us together. And it offered no rules for what happened next. Chapter 8, The Chamber of Whispers. Bjorn's advance was not a run, it was a predator's stalk, confident and unhurried. The cavern's grief-filled whispers seemed to recoil from his raw, violent intent. The blue glow of my salve painted his scarred face in ghastly shades, making his filed teeth gleam like bone needles. My hand flew to the dagger at my belt, its stone pommel was ice-cold. Useless. Think, Liana, he is muscle and rage, you are not. The map's next point was the Chamber of Whispers, but the only tunnel leading onward was behind him, a dark maw on the far side of the cavern. "The king's little pet," Bjorn growled, his voice dripping with contempt. "He sends a butterfly to fight a bear. Did he think the caves would be kind to you?" He was close now, close enough for me to smell the sour sweat on him, the metallic tang of old blood on his axe. I took a step back, my heel scraping stone. My mind raced. The warrior will take the wide path. He was here faster. But the labyrinth was about more than speed, it was a reflection. "The caves show us what we bring." "Bjorn," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "You brought an axe. What does that say about you?" He paused, a flicker of confusion crossing his brutal features. Then he laughed, a short, ugly sound. "It says I finish what I start. It says I don't trust magic and whispers. I trust this." He shook the axe. "And what do you see in this cavern?" I pressed, edging sideways along the wall, trying to put more weeping stones between us. "What do the echoes tell you?" His eyes narrowed. "They tell me nothing. They are wind in holes, tricks for the weak-minded." But his gaze flickered, just for an instant, to the stone figures. A muscle in his jaw twitched. The whispers of grief were getting to him, burrowing under his rage. He had waded through the tears, but he hadn't understood them. They clung to him like a sickness. That was my opening, not strength but distraction. "They're not tricks," I said softly, letting the Veilwalker sense open wider. The sorrow in the room amplified, a silent dirge. "They're memories. Can't you hear them? The pup lost to the frost, the mate who never returned from the hunt." I was parroting the fragments I'd heard, weaving them into a net. Bjorn's knuckles whitened on his axe haft. "Silence, your father," I whispered, pushing blindly, gambling on the most common grief of all in the harsh north. "What does the stone say about your father?" It was a guess, a desperate stab in the dark, but it struck home. Bjorn flinched as if struck. A raw, pained snarl ripped from his throat. "You know nothing," he roared, but the roar was laced with something else, a fracture. The grief whispers, tuned to his frequency now, swarmed him. I saw it in his eyes, a flash of a memory, a man lying in snow, a younger Bjorn helpless, the cold, the failure. He shook his head violently, trying to clear it. "Witch," he spat and lunged, but the lunge was off balance, fueled by chaotic emotion, not cold precision. Instead of meeting him, I dropped. I fell to my knees and rolled, not away but toward him under the wide, sweeping arc of his axe. The blade whistled over my head, striking the stone wall with a shower of sparks. I scrambled to my feet behind him. The exit tunnel was now ahead of me, with him between me and it, but his back was turned. It was a chance, a tiny, fleeting chance. I ran, not toward the tunnel, that was expected. I ran back the way I had come, toward the narrow crack I'd entered through. I heard his bellow of fury, the heavy splash as he charged after me through the shallow pool again. I reached the crack and squeezed in, my pack scraping. I couldn't run here, I could only shuffle sideways. He would never fit, not with his bulk, not with the axe. I heard him slam into the opening behind me. Stone grated, a massive fist clawed at the air, inches from my tunic. "Come out," he bellowed, his voice echoing in the confined space. "Face me, the labyrinth isn't about facing," I called back, my voice echoing down the stone throat. "It's about understanding. You failed the second test, Bjorn. You drank the grief and let it poison you." A roar of pure, impotent rage answered me, then the sounds of him backing away, cursing. I kept moving, my heart a frantic drum. I'd bought time, not escape. He would go back to the main cavern and take the other tunnel, the one leading to the Chamber of Whispers. He would be waiting for me there. I emerged from the crack into the first tunnel. I was back near the beginning. I had to find another way to the chamber. The map, I closed my eyes, picturing the spidery lines. The fork of choices was after the chamber, I was before it. There was only one path forward, the one Bjorn now guarded, unless I looked at the wall of the tunnel. The map was a flat representation, but the labyrinth was three-dimensional. My mother's note about the chamber said it will show you what you seek, and what seeks you. It didn't say how to enter. I placed my hand on the cold stone. I listened with every fiber of my being, pushing past the general heartbeat of the mountain, seeking a specific rhythm. The sigh of the narrow path had been a clue. What else was hidden? My fingers brushed a slight irregularity, a vertical seam in the rock, so fine it was nearly invisible. I traced it upwards. It curved, an archway, a hidden door sealed by time and perception. The pommel of the dagger at my belt grew warm. I pressed both hands against the seam. I didn't push, I asked. I poured my intention into the stone, not a demand but a request. A plea from a veil walker to be shown the way. For a long moment, nothing. Then, a deep, grinding vibration thrummed through my palms. With a sound like a giant sigh, a section of the wall, 8 feet high and 3 wide, slid inwards and sideways, revealing a passage so dark my salve-light seemed to drown in it. This was not on the map. This was a secret, a veilwalker's path. I slipped inside. The door grated shut behind me, sealing me in utter blackness and silence. The air was different here, older, drier, charged with a static that lifted the hairs on my arms. I walked, the blue glow my only companion. The passage descended in a tight spiral, down, down into the mountain's heart. The whispers here were different, not grief, not memory, they were questions. What do you fear more, death or failure? Is your mother's legacy a gift or a chain? Do you serve the king or your own soul? They weren't echoes of the past, they were echoes of me. My own doubts given voice by the stone. Finally the spiral ended. I stepped into the Chamber of Whispers. It was vast, a cathedral of natural stone. In the center, on a pedestal of crystalline rock, sat the moonstone shard. It was smaller than I'd imagined, about the length of my hand, and it glowed with a soft, pearlescent inner light that filled the chamber with a dim, moon-like radiance. It was beautiful. It hummed with a power that vibrated in my teeth, but I couldn't reach it. Between me and the pedestal was a chasm, perhaps 20 feet across. No bridge. The only way across was a series of 9 flat, circular stones that floated in midair, arranged in an irregular pattern over the abyss. They did not move, they simply hung there, defying reason. And on the far side of the chasm, just stepping out of the main tunnel entrance, was Bjorn. He saw me at the same moment. He saw the shard, his eyes blazed with triumph, then confusion as he took in the floating stones. He looked at me, then back at the stones. A cruel smile spread across his face. "No axe can cut that distance, little healer," he called, his voice echoing in the huge space. "But maybe you can fly." He was right. The stones were the only way, and he would reach them first. He didn't hesitate. He stepped onto the first floating stone. It held. He stepped to the second. It wobbled slightly under his weight, but held. He was a third of the way across, moving with a cautious, predatory grace. I had to move. Now, I ran to the edge on my side. The first stone was a good 5-foot jump away. I could make it. But as I prepared to jump, the whispers in the chamber coalesced into a single, clear voice in my mind, my mother's voice. "The path of air is not walked with the feet, Liana. It is walked with the heart. What is your truth? What do you truly seek?" I looked at the stone. I looked at Bjorn, now halfway across, his focus entirely on the next step. He sought the shard as a trophy, as proof of his strength. What did I seek? Not a trophy, not even victory for Kaelin, not truly. I sought understanding of myself, of my power. I sought to heal not just bodies but the rift tearing my people apart. I sought to honor my mother by becoming what she knew I could be. The first floating stone shimmered. Its surface seemed to solidify, to become more real. I took a breath, centered myself on that truth. I am a healer, a bridge, and jumped. My feet landed on solid, unwavering stone. It hadn't moved an inch. I looked at the next stone, my truth, my intent. I focused and jumped again. Secure, across the chasm, Bjorn cursed. His fourth stone had dipped violently as he landed, tilting at a dangerous angle. He barely kept his balance. He was seeking conquest. The stones responded to that desire with instability. We were mirrors. His path grew harder, wobbling, forcing him to fight for every step. Mine grew steadier as I focused not on the goal, but on the reason for the journey. He was 2 stones from the far side. I was 3 from the pedestal. We were going to reach the center at the same time. The final stone for both of us was the same one, the last step before the central platform holding the shard. There was only room for one. Our eyes met over the glowing gem. His were filled with brute determination and fury. Mine, I hoped, reflected the calm I was forcing into my veins. It was a race not of speed, but of will, the final test of the Chamber of Whispers, and the stone itself would decide who was worthy to take the last step. Chapter 9. The last stone. The world narrowed to the chasm's abyss, the humming moonstone shard, and the final, solitary platform of rock that hovered before the pedestal. Bjorn and I stood on our respective penultimate stones, poised like figures on a chessboard, with one square between us and the king. The air crackled with more than just the shard's energy. It vibrated with our opposing intentions, a silent war fought in the space between heartbeats. The floating stones were not just a path, they were judges. Bjorn's stone trembled beneath him. Sweat gleamed on his brow, not from exertion but from the strain of imposing his will, a will of pure domination onto the labyrinth's magic. He glared at the final stone, then at me, his filed teeth bared in a grimace that was more effort than smile. "It's mine which," he grunted, the words thick with effort. "My strength has brought me here. My axe will taste the air of victory." He was speaking to the cave, to the stone, as if he could bully it into submission. My stone, in contrast, felt solid, an extension of the mountain itself. I kept my focus inward, on the quiet, resonant truth I had found: I am a veil walker. I seek not to take but to mend. I didn't look at the final stone as a prize to be seized, but as the last step in a journey of understanding. "The stone doesn't care about your axe, Bjorn," I said, my voice calm, carrying easily in the vast chamber. "It cares about why you want to cross." "Why do you want the shard?" "To prove the North's supremacy," he roared, the sound echoing. "To show your soft king that true power comes from the marrow, not from dusty books and whispers." As he shouted his intent, his stone dipped again, the edge sinking a full foot. He dropped to one knee with a curse, clinging to the rock's surface. My truth held mine steady. "The shard is a symbol of ancestral favor," I said, not moving, just speaking. "Favor for what? For tearing us further apart? Is that what the ancestors want?" "More blood, they want strength," he insisted, but a sliver of doubt, or was it the chamber's whispering influence, flickered in his eyes. The ghosts of the weeping stone's grief might have been clawing at him still. "There is strength in unity," I pressed, taking a half step forward on my stable stone. "There is strength in a healer's hands that can bind a wound, and in a warrior's arm that can defend the healed. Why must they be enemies?" He struggled to his feet, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He was close enough that I could see the confusion warring with the rage in his pale eyes. The labyrinth was working on him, eroding his certainty, but his will was a formidable thing, forged in ice and hardship. He shook his head, a bull trying to dislodge a spear. "Nice words," he spat. "Words won't stop my axe." He made his move. With a guttural cry, he launched himself toward the final stone. It was a spectacular, terrifying leap, but he jumped with violence in his heart, with conquest as his goal. The final stone did not reject him, it dissolved. Not into nothing, but into a cloud of fine, silver mist where solid rock should have been. Bjorn's triumphant roar turned into a scream of sheer terror as he fell through the empty air, arms flailing, into the blackness of the chasm. The scream echoed, rising and then fading, swallowed by the deep until there was silence. I stood frozen, my hand clamped over my mouth. I hadn't wanted this, not his death. The chamber had judged him. His truth, pure, divisive domination, had been deemed unworthy of the final step. The silver mist where the stone had been coalesced, solidified, and reformed into the perfect, flat stepping stone. It waited for me, glowing faintly. Trembling, I forced myself to look away from the abyss. The shard pulsed on its pedestal, its light seeming gentler now, an invitation. My truth had held the path. My truth was what the labyrinth, what the ancestors had accepted. I stepped onto the final stone. It was as solid as the mountain's roots. I stood before the moonstone shard. Up close, it was even more beautiful. Its light wasn't harsh, it was liquid, cool, and it hummed with a song that resonated in the very center of my chest. I could feel its power, not for destruction, but for connection, for memory. I didn't grab it. I knelt before the pedestal as if before an elder. "I seek to heal," I whispered to it. "I seek to remember what we were, to understand what we are, and to help build what we could be. I seek to walk the veil between our past and our future and to mend the tears." I reached out. my fingers did not close around it in a grip of possession. They hovered open beneath it, the shards humming intensified, then it floated gently off the pedestal and settled into my palm. It was warm, not hot, its weight was comforting, not burdensome. The light it emitted wrapped around my hand and forearm, painting my skin with pearlescent swirls before slowly fading into the gem itself. I had it, not by taking but by being deemed worthy to carry. But the trial wasn't over. I had to return, and Bjorn's fate was a declaration of war in itself. Jerk would never accept this. As the shard's light dimmed to a soft inner glow, the chamber changed. The far wall where Bjorn had entered shimmered. The solid rock became transparent like dark glass, and through it I saw a vision. It was the main cavern outside where the waterfall thundered. I saw Kalen standing rigid, his face carved from anxiety. Jerk paced like a caged beast. The moon was high, it was midnight. Hours had passed, then the vision shifted. I saw not the present but a possible future, two futures splitting like branches from a tree. One branch, Jerk enraged, drawing his sword in the cavern, his men following. Kalen's guards meeting them, the waterfall running red, war immediate and brutal, sparked by Bjorn's death. The second branch, the same scene, but I walked out of the fissure alone, holding the shard, Jerk's fury. Kalen's tense hope, and then I saw myself not cowering but walking forward, offering the shard not to Kalen but placing it on the ground between the two alphas, speaking words I couldn't hear. The vision showed Jerk's rage faltering, replaced by stunned confusion, then a slow, grudging consideration. The chamber of whispers was showing me what I sought, and what sought me. It sought a peacemaker, it sought the bridge. The vision faded, the wall was just stone again. I had my path. It was infinitely more dangerous than navigating the labyrinth. I had to walk out of this mountain and step into the heart of a political storm, armed only with a crystal and a truth Jerk did not want to hear. I placed the shard carefully into my pack, cushioned by cloth. Its gentle light leaked through the seams. I turned my back on the pedestal and the chasm that held Bjorn, my heart heavy. The return journey was different. The labyrinth, satisfied with its verdict, seemed to guide me. Paths that were hidden before now revealed themselves, a straight, smooth tunnel leading upward. The whispers were silent. The mountain's heartbeat was a steady, reassuring drum. As I walked, I practiced the words in my head. I thought of my mother. I thought of the throne that had glowed. I thought of the floating stone that had held my weight because I sought to heal. I reached the final turn. Ahead was the fissure, the roar of the waterfall growing louder with each step. Torchlight flickered beyond. I paused. I could still feel the shard's warmth against my back. I could still hear the echo of Bjorn's scream. I was no longer the girl who had entered. I was the woman the labyrinth had forged, a veil walker, a truth bearer, and the most dangerous part of the trial was just beginning. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and stepped out of the mountain's mouth into the waiting storm of alphas. The hook was no longer in me. I was holding the line, and I had to decide who to pull from the precipice. Chapter 10. The storm above the waterfall. The roar of the waterfall hit me first, a physical force after the tomb silence of the caves. Then the cold spray. Then the light of a dozen torches, blazing in the night, painting the swirling mist with garish orange. I stood in the fissure's mouth, blinking. The crowd had not dispersed. They had waited, a tense, silent vigil under the high, full moon. All heads turned toward me at once. My appearance was not heroic. I was smeared with dirt and ancient dust, my clothes torn from squeezing through stone, my hair a wild tangle, but my pack glowed from within with a soft, persistent, pearlescent light. Kalen saw it first. His rigid posture, which had looked like carved stone, softened infinitesimally. A breath he seemed to have been holding for hours escaped his lips. His stormy eyes locked onto mine, and in them I saw a flash of something fierce and primal, relief and a flicker of triumph. Alpha Jerk saw it too, his bear-like frame stiffened. His pale hawk's eyes swept past me, searching the darkness of the fissure for his champion. They found only emptiness. His face, already hard, turned to granite. He took a step forward, his hand falling to the hilt of the massive sword at his side. "Where," he growled, the single word cutting through the waterfall's din like a knife, "is Bjorn?" The entire clearing held its breath. Ronan and Merk moved subtly closer to Kalen. The northern warriors behind Jerk mirrored them, hands on weapons. This was the moment. The vision in the chamber had shown me the two paths. I had to choose my branch. I didn't walk toward Kalen. I didn't raise the shard in victory. I took 3 slow, deliberate steps into the center of the clearing between the two factions. The spray from the waterfall dampened my face, mixing with the cold sweat of fear. I looked directly at Jerk. "Bjorn fell," I said, my voice clear and carrying. I offered no details, no blame, just the stark, terrible fact. A collective gasp went up from the northerners. Jerk's eyes widened, then narrowed to slits of pure, incandescent rage. Fell, he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. You little viper, you murdered him in the dark. The labyrinth judged him, Alpha Jerk, I said, holding his furious gaze, forcing myself not to flinch, as it judged me. It does not respond to muscle alone, it responds to truth. Your truth, the truth of cowards and schemers, he roared, spittle flying. He drew his sword. The rasp of steel was the loudest sound in the world. His men drew theirs in unison. You killed my champion, the trial is void. This means war, Kalen stepped forward, his own expression turning deadly. You agreed to the ancient laws, Jerk. The trial's outcome is sacred. Your man fell. Ours emerged with the shard. The ancestors have spoken. They have spoken treason, Jerk screamed, raising his sword. He pointed it at me, and I will have their speaker's blood to answer it. Take her. 3 northern warriors broke from the line and lunged toward me. Everything happened in heartbeats. Merc and 2 royal guards surged forward to intercept them. Steel clashed against steel with a shriek that rivaled the waterfall. Kalen didn't move toward the fighters. He moved toward Jerk. He didn't draw a weapon. He simply strode forward, his power radiating from him in an almost visible wave. You will not touch her, he said, his voice not a shout but a low, resonant command that vibrated in the chest of every wolf present. The Alpha King's compulsion. Jerk, caught between his rage and the primal pressure of a superior Alpha's will, faltered for a second. It was the second I needed. I didn't run, I didn't cower, I did what the vision had shown me. I yanked open my pack and pulled out the moonstone shard. Its glow, freed from the cloth, burst forth, painting the chaotic scene in soft, magical light. It hummed a sound that seemed to quiet the very clash of weapons for an instant. I didn't give it to Kalen. I turned and with all my strength threw it, not at anyone, at the ground in the very center of the clearing, right between the charging northerners and the defending royal guards. It didn't shatter, it landed with a thump and rolled, coming to a stop, its light pulsing gently on the wet stone. A silent, radiant barrier. Everyone froze, the fighting stopped. All eyes were drawn to the pulsating gem, its ancient magic a tangible presence in the modern night. You want the sign of the ancestors? I cried out, my voice breaking with strain and conviction. There it is not a weapon, it is a question. I stepped forward, placing myself between the shard and Jerk, my arms spread. It asks if we are still the people who remember. It asks if our strength is only for tearing each other apart or if it can be for building something that lasts. Bjorn sought to wield it as a club. The labyrinth denied him. It gave it to me, a healer. What does that tell you? Jerk stared at the shard, then at me, his sword still raised but his fury now mixed with a baffled, superstitious awe. The shard's light reflected in his wild eyes. It tells me you are a witch who has bewitched the stones, he muttered, but the certainty was gone from his voice. It tells you the old ways are not what you think, I shot back. They are not about who is strongest in a cave, they are about wisdom, about balance. My mother was a dreamwalker. I am a veil walker. These are titles from your precious past, Jerk, and we are here not in the north but at the heart of the kingdom, trying to stop you from destroying the very heritage you claim to defend. Silence. The only sound was the eternal thunder of the waterfall and the ragged breathing of men. Kalen spoke then, his voice measured, seizing the opening I had created. The shard has been won by the crown's champion, according to the ancient law. The North's demands are forfeit. He paused, letting that sink into Jerk's stunned silence. But the crown is not without mercy or wisdom. He walked forward past me and stood looking down at the glowing shard. The Veil Walker is correct. The ancestors have sent a message. Not of conquest, but of counsel. He looked up at Jerk. Take the shard, Jerk. Another gasp, this time from both sides. Ronan looked aghast. Merc hissed, my king. Kalen held up a hand. Take it, carry it back to the Frostfang shamans. Let them read its truth. Let them tell you if its bearer, a healer of the old blood, speaks falsehood. We will suspend our judgment for 1 moon cycle. Take the shard, consult your elders, and return here. Then we will talk. Not as victor and vanquished, but as 2 sides of the same wolf seeking a path forward. It was a masterstroke. It was the branch from the vision. It offered Jerk a face-saving retreat, a chance to consult the very traditions he revered. It acknowledged the shard's power without surrendering authority, and it bought time. Jerk's sword arm slowly lowered. He stared at Kalen, then at the shard, then at me. The rage was still there, banked like a fire, but confusion and a deep, superstitious hesitation had doused its flames. The magic of the labyrinth made manifest in the glowing stone at his feet was a language even he couldn't shout down. He sheathed his sword with a rough, angry motion. He gestured to one of his warriors, a grizzled older man with ritual scars on his face, a shaman perhaps. The man approached the shard, cautiously knelt and picked it up. It glowed brighter in his hands, humming softly. The shaman's eyes widened. He looked at Jerk and gave a slow, awed nod. Jerk's jaw worked. He finally looked at Kalen. one moon cycle, he ground out, we take the stone. We will listen to its voice, and then we will return. His gaze swept to me, lingering with a mixture of hatred and a strange, grudging curiosity. This changes nothing, healer, it only delays. He turned, his furs swirling. North. We go, the northern warriors formed up around him and the shaman holding the shard. Without another word, they melted into the forest shadows, leaving behind the tension, the ringing steel, and the glowing memory of the moonstone's light. The clearing was suddenly, terribly quiet. The royal guards began to tend to minor wounds. Merc was swearing under his breath. Ronan let out a long, slow sigh, looking at his brother with undisguised admiration. Kalen did not look triumphant. He looked exhausted, and his eyes found me. He walked over to where I stood, trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. That, he said quietly for my ears only, was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I have ever witnessed. It was the only thing, I whispered back, my knees threatening to buckle. The chamber it showed me, I know, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. He didn't touch me, but he stood close, a solid presence in the chaotic aftermath. You walked the path, you brought back not just a stone, but a chance. He studied my dirty, exhausted face. You are bleeding, I looked down. A shallow cut from a flying stone chip decorated my forearm. I hadn't even felt it. Come, Kalen said, not as a king, but as someone stating a simple fact. Your part in this night is over. You need a healer. He turned and began walking back toward the castle, his guards falling in around him. I stood for a moment, staring at the spot where the moonstone shard had lain. I had thrown away the victory symbol. I had gambled everything on a vision and a truth. And somehow I had turned a certain war into a precarious, shimmering possibility. As I followed the torches back to the castle, the hook I'd felt was gone. In its place was a new, terrifying weight. I was no longer a piece on the board. I had become a player. And the next move in one moon's time would be mine to make. The storm had receded, but the clouds still gathered on the horizon, darker and more unpredictable than ever. Chapter 11. The scar and the scribe. The cut on my arm was shallow, but Master Salon insisted on treating it himself in the royal infirmary. As he cleaned it with a tincture that smelled of citrus and lightning, his hands were gentle, but his eyes were sharp. The moonstone shard is gone to the north, he stated, not a question. The news had raced through the castle like wildfire. Kalen gave it to them, I said, wincing as the antiseptic bit. As a consult for one moon cycle, Salon nodded slowly, applying a salve that cooled the sting instantly. A bold gamble to hand your enemy the symbol of your victory and hope their own superstitions work in your favor. It is either genius or madness. He finished bandaging my arm with efficient precision, and you, throwing it at their feet. What were you thinking, child? I was thinking the vision in the chamber showed me that's what would stop the fighting, I confessed, feeling foolish under his wise gaze. It showed me two paths, one of blood, one of that. Ah, Salon murmured, sitting back on his stool. The Chamber of Whispers shows potentialities, not certainties. You chose a branch and you made it real. That is a veil walker's true gift, not just to see the between places, but to choose which side of the veil to step onto. He looked at me with new respect. You did not just survive the labyrinth, Liana, you changed its story. His words should have comforted me. Instead, a deep fatigue settled into my bones, heavier than any pack. The fear, the tension, the sheer mental exertion of the last day crashed down. My wolf, who had been a steady, watchful presence during the trial, now retreated into a fuzzy, exhausted sleep in the depths of my soul. Get some rest, Salon ordered, seeing the weariness on my face. Real rest. Your body has been through an ordeal and your spirit has borne even more, but rest was a foreign country. My new quarters in the healer's wing felt too large, too quiet. The memory of the chasm, of Bjorn's scream, of Jerk's sword glinting in the torchlight, played behind my eyelids whenever I closed them. I paced instead, my fingers tracing the silver armband, now a permanent part of me. A soft knock came at the door just as the first gray light of dawn touched the window. I opened it to find Ronan. He looked as tired as I felt, but he offered a faint, weary smile. May I come in? I nodded, stepping aside. He entered, holding a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. I won't stay long, he said, placing the bundle on my table. I just wanted to bring you this and to say, thank you. What you did at the waterfall, you saved lives, possibly the kingdom. I just didn't want more people to die, I said softly, looking at the bundle. That just is what makes it remarkable, Ronan replied. He unwrapped the cloth. Inside were two things, a small, plain wooden box and a slender, leather-bound book I didn't recognize. The box is from Kalen, Ronan said, pushing it toward me. He said to give it to you when you were alone. I opened the box. Nestled on a bed of velvet was a necklace, not silver and sapphire like my mother's pendant, but a simple, elegant chain from which hung a single, teardrop-shaped piece of polished gray stone. It was the same stone as the pommel of the dagger he'd given me. It's from the labyrinth, Ronan explained quietly. From the chamber itself, he had it fashioned while you were inside. He said it's a reminder that you walked where others fear to tread and returned. The weight of the gesture was immense. I didn't know what to say. I carefully placed the necklace back in the box. "And the book?" I asked, my voice thick. "That," Ronan said, his expression turning serious, "is from me. And it is a request." He opened the book. The pages were blank. "It's a journal, but not for memories, for understanding." I frowned, confused. "The northern shamans have the moonstone shard for one moon cycle," he said. "They will study it, question it. They will come back with interpretations, arguments, demands based on what they believe the ancestors are saying through it. We need to be ready. We need our own interpretation." "Our own shaman?" I asked, the idea dawning with a sense of dread. "Our own veil walker," Ronan corrected gently. "You said the chamber showed you visions. You said the labyrinth spoke to you. This gift of yours, we need to understand it, to hone it, not as a weapon but as a lens, to see what they might see. To find counterarguments rooted in the same ancient magic they revere." He pushed the blank journal closer. "I want you to write down everything, not just what happened, but what you felt, the whispers, the vibrations, the images, the emotions in the stones. Study your mother's journal not just as a history, but as a textbook. Cross-reference her symbols with what you experienced. Try to meditate, to listen, to see if you can glimpse threads of what the shamans might be discussing. You have a connection to that shard now. Use it." The task felt overwhelming. "Ronan, I'm not a seer. My mother had flashes. I had stress and terror in a magical cave. And in that stress and terror, you navigated a sentient maze and averted a battle," he said firmly. "You have the gift. It is untrained, wild, but it is there. We have 1 month to give it some semblance of discipline. Will you try?" He was not ordering me as his brother might. He was asking, pleading almost. I saw the weight of the kingdom's future in his earnest, tired eyes. I looked at the blank pages of the journal. A map of the unknown waiting to be filled. I thought of my mother's cryptic notes now holding new, terrifying relevance. "I'll try," I whispered. Ronan's shoulders sagged in relief. "Thank you. I'll have any texts on ancient symbols, shamanic practices, or veil walker lore from the royal archives sent to you. Study with Solon, ask questions." He stood to leave. "And Liana, get some actual sleep first. You're no good to anyone exhausted." After he left, I sat for a long time, the two gifts before me. The gray stone necklace, a cold, solid token of a king's unexpected regard. The blank journal, a terrifying invitation into the depths of my own uncertain power. I picked up my mother's journal, flipping to the page with the labyrinth map. My eyes traced the path I had taken, the hidden door I had found. In the margin, in her flowing script, was a note I'd overlooked. "The gift is a river, not a tool. You cannot wield it, you can only learn its currents and then let it carry you." I opened the new journal to the first page. I dipped a quill in ink. I hesitated, then began to write. The first echo asked for my fear. I gave it my name instead. The words flowed, shaky at first, then steadier. I described the sigh of the stone, the crushing grief of the weepers, the judging silence of the floating stones. I drew the symbols I'd seen etched in corners of the chamber. I wrote of the warmth of the throne, the electric shock of Kaelin's touch, the resonant song of the ancestral power during the coronation. Hours passed. The dawn became morning. As I wrote, patterns began to emerge. The experiences were not random. They were dialogues. The mountain, the throne, the ancestors, they were all asking questions, and my responses, my truth, shaped the answers. I was not just recording events. I was translating a language I hadn't known I spoke. A language I would now have to speak fluently in 1 month's time, to counter the interpretations of northern shamans holding a piece of the mountain's heart. The cut on my arm was bandaged and healing, but the real work, the scar that would shape the future, was just beginning. I was no longer just a healer of bodies. I was apprenticing to become a healer of a fractured kingdom, and my syllabus was written in whispers and stone. The hook was now a quill in my hand, and every word I wrote was a stitch in a tapestry of peace or a thread in a noose. Chapter 12, The Language of Stone. The moon cycle began not with a bang, but with a deep, scholarly silence. My quarters transformed into a war room of a different kind. Books arrived, towering, leather-bound treatises on geomantic resonance, crumbling scrolls on shamanic moonrites, illuminated manuscripts filled with symbols that danced before my eyes. The air smelled of old parchment, ink, and the faint, sharp scent of the herb Solon had me brewing to sharpen inner sight, a bitter tea that left my tongue tingling. My days fell into a rigid, exhausting rhythm. Mornings were spent with Master Salon, not learning anatomy but theory. He called it energetic topography. Every living thing, every place of power has a signature, he explained, his finger tracing a complex, swirling diagram. Like a fingerprint of energy, the labyrinth has one, the throne room has one, you have one. The gift of the Veil Walker is to feel these signatures, to read them and sometimes to harmonize with them or alter their disharmony. He had me sit in different parts of the castle garden, my journal in hand, and simply listen, not with my ears but with that inner sense. I recorded the tone of the sun-drenched herb bed, a bright, cheerful C major chord of growth, the echo of the ancient willow by the pond, a melancholy, whispering melody of centuries, and the jarring, silent screech from a patch of earth where, he later told me, a bloody duel had once taken place. It was draining, like holding a muscle clenched I never knew I had, but slowly a new world layered atop the physical one began to reveal itself. Afternoons were for the archives with Ronan. He was a relentless but kind taskmaster. The northern shamans, he said, unrolling a genealogy of Frostfang ritual leaders, will focus on three things: lineage, omen, and sacrifice. They will use the shard to try to prove Kaelin's line is weak, that your presence is a bad omen, and that only a return to their harsh ways is a sufficient sacrifice to appease the ancestors. He pointed to a symbol in my mother's journal that matched one on the scroll. This is the rune for cleansing fire. They will argue the kingdom needs burning clean of modern influence. What is our counter, rooted in the same symbolism? I stared at the rune, my mind aching. Then I remembered the feel of the labyrinth, not a destructive fire, but a deep, purifying earth. Fire destroys, I said slowly, but earth consumes and transforms. It makes new soil from old death. Could the same rune in a different context mean renewal instead of cleansing? Ronan's eyes lit up. Yes, exactly. Context is everything. Your mother's journal is our context. Their interpretations will be rigid. Ours must be fluid, deeper. Evenings were my own, and I spent them in a strange, twilight practice. I would wear the gray stone necklace from Kaelin, hold the dagger with its matching pommel, and try to reach for the moonstone shard, not physically. It was hundreds of miles away, but energetically. According to Salon, having carried it, having been accepted by it, created a bond, a faint, psychic thread. I would sit in the dark, clear my mind, and focus on the memory of its hum in my palm, its cool light. At first, nothing. Then, after days of frustrating silence, I felt it. A faint, almost imperceptible ping, like a distant bell struck underwater, a sense of direction. North, and with it, the faintest whisper of not words but intent, a focused, collective curiosity. The shamans were examining it. The connection was terrifying. It meant the bond was real. It also meant I was not just studying theory, I was eavesdropping on the enemy's camp, however faintly. One such evening, about 2 weeks into the moon cycle, the connection suddenly sharpened. The distant bell became a clear, resonant chime that vibrated in my teeth, and with it came a flash, an image clear as day, a dark tent of hides, the shard placed on a drumskin painted with spirals. Around it, 3 elderly shamans, their faces etched with deep lines, their eyes milky with age and focus. Their hands were raised over the shard and they were chanting. I couldn't hear the words, but I felt the purpose, a seeking, a demanding question. Show us the weakness of the thorn line. The shard's light in the vision pulsed. It did not show weakness. Instead, the light coalesced into a shimmering image above it, a familiar, stark symbol, the twin wolves of the throne, their amber eyes. But then the image fractured. One wolf's form wavered, its outline bleeding into the light. A shaman pointed, his mouth moving in what looked like triumph. The connection snapped. I gasped, jerking back in my chair, my heart hammering. The vision had been so strong, so intrusive. They were using powerful magic to interrogate the shard, to find a flaw in Kaelin's symbolic right to rule, and the shard had shown them something that made them triumphant. I grabbed my journal and scribbled frantically, describing every detail before it faded. The tent, the drum, the fractured wolf. I had to tell Ronan, I had to tell Kaelin. I found Ronan in his study, going over border reports. He listened in grave silence as I described the vision, my words tumbling over each other. A fractured wolf, he murmured, stroking his chin. It could mean anything, a weak heir which Kaelin is not, a betrayal within the family, he trailed off, his eyes darkening with unpleasant possibilities. We need to counter it, I said urgently. If that's the omen they bring back, we counter it with a stronger omen, a voice said from the doorway. Kaelin stood there, having entered silently. He'd been out on patrol along the northern border and still wore travel-stained leathers. He looked weary, but his gaze was sharp as a razor. He had heard everything. How? I asked. He walked into the room, his eyes on me. You said the shard showed the throne's wolves first, unfractured. It was only when they pushed, when they demanded weakness, that the image broke. He stopped before me. They asked the wrong question. They sought a crack. We must provide an answer to a better question. And what question is that? Ronan asked. Kaelin's stormy eyes held mine. The question you asked in the labyrinth, Liana. The question the throne answered when you sat upon it. Not where is the weakness, but where is the strength, not how is the line broken, but how can the circle be made whole? He turned to his brother. When they return, they will present their fractured wolf as proof of decay. We will not argue their interpretation. We will present a new one. He looked back at me. You will present it. Ice flooded my veins. Me, how? You are the Veil Walker. The shard accepted you. You carry a piece of the labyrinth around your neck. He gestured to the gray stone pendant. You will stand before them, before the entire court, and you will perform a reading. Not of the shard, they will have that, but of the throne, of the living stone of this castle. You will ask it the better question, and you will translate its answer for all to hear. The audacity of it stole my breath. It was a theatrical, incredibly risky gambit, a direct challenge to the shaman's authority on their own spiritual turf. What if the throne doesn't answer? My voice was a whisper. Then we are no worse off than if we simply tried to deny their vision, Kaelin said bluntly. But it will answer you, Liana, it already has. His certainty was absolute, forged in the memory of amber eyes glowing in pre-dawn light. Ronan was nodding slowly, a strategist seeing the move on the board. It turns their own magic against them. They use an ancient stone to seek flaws. We use an ancient throne to demonstrate unity. The symbolism is impeccable. I felt sick. The pressure was monstrous. My training was that of a novice. I was learning to hear whispers in gardens, not conduct a public symphony with a kingdom's soul. Kaelin saw my fear. He stepped closer. The scent of pine and cold wind clung to him. You do not have to do this alone. Salon will help you prepare. Ronan will craft the ceremony. I will be there. He paused and his voice dropped. The throne recognized you. The mountain spoke to you. I trust them. Now you must trust yourself. He left then, leaving Ronan and me in a silence thick with impending doom and dizzying possibility. I looked down at my hands, healer's hands, now asked to wield the fate of nations. The scholarly peace of the last 2 weeks was shattered. The real test was not in understanding the language of stone. It was in speaking it, loudly and clearly, before an audience of wolves who longed for me to fail. The moon was waning, their return approached, and I had to learn to make a throne sing a song of unity or watch the kingdom fracture to the beat of a shaman's drum. The hook was in my throat now, and every word I would soon speak would either reel us all into safety or gut us on the rocks. Chapter 13. The heart of the mountain. The week before the full moon passed in a fever dream of preparation. My quiet study became a crucible. Master Salon's lessons grew intensely practical. You cannot just listen to the throne, he instructed, standing with me in the now empty great hall in the dead of night. The throne sat in a pool of moonlight, its carved wolves watching us with silent, amber judgment. You must converse, you must establish a resonance. Like tuning 2 strings to the same pitch, he had me place my hands on the armrests where I had that first fateful morning. Do not ask it a question yet, just hum, hum, I echoed, incredulous. A single, sustained note. Find the tone that makes the wood vibrate in sympathy. Find the throne's fundamental frequency. It felt absurd, but I tried. I closed my eyes, pushed aside my embarrassment, and hummed. Low at first, then higher. Nothing, just the feel of cool, smooth oak under my palms. Then on a mid-range note I felt it, a faint, answering buzz. Not in the air but up my arms, a subtle vibration in the wood that matched my hum. I held the note and the vibration strengthened, becoming a gentle, rhythmic pulse that matched my own heartbeat. Good, Salon whispered. Now hold that connection. Think of the question not as words. As a feeling, as an image, the question of wholeness, of unity. Pour that feeling into the vibration. I focused. I thought of the kingdom not as a map of territories, but as a living body. I thought of the northern mountains as strong bones, the southern rivers as lifeblood, the forests as lungs. I thought of the throne not as a seat of power, but as the steady, unifying heart. I poured this complex tapestry of connection into the humming note I held, feeding it through my hands into the ancient wood. The throne's vibration changed. It deepened, warmed. The carved wolves beneath my fingers didn't glow, but the air around them seemed to thicken, to shimmer slightly in the moonlight. A sense of immense age and patient strength flowed into me, not words but a sentiment of endurance, of cycles, of weathering countless storms. It remembers, I breathed, my eyes still closed. It remembers every king, every crisis. It knows division is a season, not a permanent state. Now, Salon said, his voice tight with excitement, ask your question, silently. With the same feeling, I formed the thought, the plea, show me our strength, show me how the circle is made whole. For a long moment, nothing but the warm vibration. Then, images, not a vision like in the chamber, but impressions layered and swift. The throne room full not of arguing dignitaries, but of wolves in both forms, moving together in a complex, beautiful dance of celebration, a mood of unity from centuries past. A seedling breaking through charred earth after a great fire, nurtured by sunlight and rain from all directions. Two hands, one calloused and scarred from a warrior's axe, one slender and stained with healer's herbs, clasping together over a freshly tilled field. The images were of synthesis, of different parts working together to create something stronger. They were the throne's answer, its truth. I broke the connection, slumping forward, drained, the vibration faded, the hall was just a hall again. Salon caught my shoulder, steadying me, his eyes gleamed in the dark. You did it, you have your answer, now you must learn to show it. The next phase was even harder. Ronan designed a ceremony of inquiry for the day of the northern return. It would take place at high noon in the throne room, with the full court as witness. I was to stand before the throne, invoke the connection, and then translate the impressions into words for all to hear. It was part theater, part sacred rite, and my performance had to be flawless. We rehearsed relentlessly. The words were not scripted, they had to feel authentic, inspired, but the rhythm, the cues were planned. I would begin with the hum, establishing the resonance publicly. Then I would speak the impressions as they came. You must not seem like you are reciting, Ronan coached, pacing before me in his study. You must seem like a conduit, the throne speaks through you, there must be wonder in your voice, awe, absolute conviction. I felt like a fraud. I was planning a moment of supposed divine inspiration. The pressure was a constant, suffocating cloak. The only respite came from an unexpected source. Kalen, he didn't offer more training, he didn't offer platitudes, he simply appeared. Sometimes in the garden at dusk, saying nothing, just standing nearby as I tried to recover my energy. Sometimes he would leave a book on a bench, not a scholarly text, but an old book of territorial folk tales about cooperation between unlikely allies. Once he found me in the archives, head buried in my arms on a desk, overwhelmed. He didn't touch me, he just said, "The mountain does not fear the storm, Liana. It uses the rain to carve new paths." Then he was gone. His quiet, steadfast belief was a different kind of anchor. He wasn't asking me to be a savior, he was asking me to be what I was, a veil walker, a reader of deeper truths, and he never once doubted I could. The night before the full moon, sleep was impossible. I stood on my balcony, the gray stone pendant cool against my skin, looking at the bloated silver moon dominating the sky. Tomorrow, Jerk would return. Tomorrow, the shamans would present their fractured wolf and demand submission. Tomorrow I would have to stand before them all and prove that the heart of the kingdom beat with a rhythm of unity, not fracture. A soft knock. I knew who it was before I said, "Enter." Kalen stepped onto the balcony. He was dressed for tomorrow in formal, dark clothes, but he looked as sleepless as I felt. For a long moment we just stood in silence, watching the moon. "Are you ready?" he asked finally, his voice low. "No," I answered truthfully. "Good," he said, a faint, almost smile touching his lips. "If you felt ready, you would be overconfident. This is not about confidence, it is about truth, and you carry that truth within you." He turned to face me, his stormy eyes serious in the moonlight. "Whatever happens tomorrow, know this, you have already changed the course of this kingdom. You walked the labyrinth and returned with mercy. You faced down an alpha's sword with a crystal. You have shown us that our oldest stories have new endings." He took a half step closer. "I chose you because of your bloodline, but I stand with you tomorrow because of your heart, Liana Hayes. Remember that when you stand before the throne, you are not alone." His words settled in my chest, warm and solid, melting some of the ice of my fear. He wasn't just the king relying on a tool, he was Kalen believing in me. He didn't wait for a response. He gave a single, curt nod, a gesture of shared resolve, and left as silently as he came. I looked back at the moon. It no longer seemed like a cold, judging eye. It was just a moon, a stone in the sky, and I was a woman with a stone around her neck about to try and speak for a stone chair. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. The fear was still there, clawing at my throat, but beneath it now was a spark of something else, not confidence, not readiness, purpose. The hook was no longer in my throat, it was in my hand. Tomorrow I would cast the line, not knowing what I would reel in, peace, war, triumph, or ruin, but I would cast it with all the truth I possessed. The heart of the mountain had whispered to me. Tomorrow I would have to make the whole kingdom hear its beat. Chapter 14, The Fractured Wolf and the Whole Circle. High noon in the Great Hall. The same space that had witnessed my transgression, then Kalen's coronation, now held a different, more volatile energy. The room was packed to the stone arches. Southern lords in silks, northern warriors in furs, court officials, elders, guards, a sea of faces all taut with anticipation. The air smelled of sweat, perfume, cold steel, and dread. The throne sat empty on its dais, a silent protagonist in the day's drama. Kaelin stood before it, flanked by Ronan and Merc. He was the picture of Alpha King authority, dressed in black and deep blue, his face an impassive mask. But I, standing to the side with Master Salon, saw the tension in the line of his shoulders. The massive doors groaned open. Alpha Jerk entered, his northern retinue flowing in behind him like a gray, grim tide. The mood in the room dipped, turned colder. Jerk's eyes swept over the assembly with disdain before landing on Kaelin. He carried a locked, iron-bound chest. The shaman from the waterfall followed, holding the chest's key on a thong around his neck. No greetings were exchanged. The time for courtesy was past. "Thorn," Jerk's voice boomed, dispensing with all titles. "The moon has cycled, the ancestors have been consulted. We return with their verdict." He nodded to the shaman, who stepped forward, unlocked the chest, and lifted the lid. A collective intake of breath swept the room as the moonstone shard was revealed. In the bright noon light streaming through the windows, it didn't glow with its inner moon radiance. It looked like a pale, milky quartz, dormant, waiting. The shaman lifted it with reverence. His voice, when he spoke, was a dry, rustling sound, yet it carried to every corner. "We have listened to the stone's voice for 30 nights and days. We have asked it of lineage, of strength, of the future." He paused, his milky eyes scanning the crowd. "The stone has answered. It shows us the symbol of the throne wolves, the mark of the ruling line." He held the shard high. "And it shows us a fracture." As he spoke the last word, he channeled a thread of his own will into the shard. It awoke. A beam of pearlescent light shot from its core, projecting an image onto the high wall above the throne. There, shimmering in the air, were the 2 carved wolves of the throne. And just as in my vision, one wolf's form shimmered, its outline blurring and breaking apart as if made of smoke. A murmur of shock and alarm rippled through the hall. Southern lords exchanged worried glances. Northern warriors stood taller, their expressions grimly satisfied. "The line is weakened," Jerk declared, his voice triumphantly cruel. "The ancestral power itself declares it. The foundation of your rule is cracked, Thorn. The old magic does not recognize your strength. The only path to renewal is a return to the pure ways." To the North's leadership, the accusation hung in the air, given weight by the magical, undeniable image hovering on the wall. Kaelin's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, his gaze flicking to me for the briefest second. It was time. Master Salon gave my arm a subtle nudge. My legs felt like water, the eyes of the kingdom were upon me. I walked forward, the sound of my own footsteps loud in my ears. I stopped at the base of the dais, between Kaelin and Jerk, facing the throne. "The stone has shown one truth," I said, my voice surprisingly clear, though my heart was trying to escape my ribs. "But a stone, like a story, can be asked different questions." Jerk snorted. "More pretty words, healer." "The magic has spoken. It has answered the question you asked it," I agreed, turning to face him and the shaman. "You asked for weakness, and in a line of unbroken strength, even the suggestion of a flaw is what you saw." I turned back to the throne, but the ancestors are not one note. "Their wisdom is a song, not a shout. You consulted a stone torn from the mountain's heart. Let us now consult the mountain's oldest seat." I climbed the 3 steps to the throne. The carved wolves watched me, their amber eyes knowing. I could feel the skepticism, the hostility, the desperate hope beating at me from the crowd. I blocked it out. I placed my hands on the armrests, the wood familiar and cool. I closed my eyes. I found the hum, the fundamental note. It rose from my chest, a low, steady vibration that filled my throat. I held it, pouring my focus into my hands. For a terrible moment, nothing. The hall was utterly silent, waiting for my failure. Then the vibration answered. A soft, resonant pulse traveled up from the throne, through my arms, meeting my hum. The connection snapped into place, warmer, stronger than in practice. The throne remembered me. I opened my eyes but kept my focus inward. "You sought a fracture in the symbol of power," I said, my voice now amplified by the throne's resonance, carrying a subtle, echoing quality that made people lean forward. "But the throne, the living memory of this kingdom, asks a different question." I poured the feeling of my rehearsed question into the link, the image of the whole circle, the living body of the land. I spoke as the impressions flowed into me, my eyes seeing not the hall but the visions the throne showed. "It does not show me 2 wolves," I announced, my voice filling with wonder. "It shows me a pack, countless wolves flowing through these halls across the centuries. Not just alphas, but healers, farmers, hunters, storytellers. The line is not a brittle chain, it is a river fed by 1,000 streams." The shimmering image of the fractured wolf on the wall began to waver, challenged by the new energy in the room. "It shows me the strength of the north," I continued, the images vivid behind my eyes. "The enduring ice that preserves, and the strength of the south, the fertile valley that nourishes. Not as rivals, but as the inhale and the exhale of the same great body." I could feel the throne's vibrations strengthening, agreeing, pouring its ancient certainty into my words. "You see a broken circle," I said, my gaze sweeping over Jerk and his shaman, who now watched me with a mix of fury and stunned confusion. "The throne shows me how a circle is forged, in the joining of different metals, in the heat of shared challenge, in the hammer strike of compromise. The fracture you see is not a weakness, it is a seam. The place where new strength was welded on after the last great storm, making the whole stronger than before." As I spoke the final words, I pushed the full force of the throne's sentiment, the memory of unity after past divisions, through our connection. The shard in the shaman's hand flared. The projected image of the single, fractured wolf dissolved. In its place, the throne's own energy, channeled through me and resonating with the sympathetic shard, painted a new image on the wall. It was the throne room again, but as I had seen it, filled with a joyous, mingled pack in celebration. Then it shifted to the seedling in charred earth, then to the clasped hands of warrior and healer. Simple, powerful pictures of synthesis and renewal. The display lasted only 10 seconds, then the shard's light died and the images vanished, but the silence that followed was earth-shaking. It was the silence of a paradigm shifting. I broke the connection with the throne, my knees buckling. I gripped the armrest to stay upright, utterly drained. Jerk was staring at the blank wall, his face pale, his earlier triumph utterly shattered. His shaman was looking at the now dormant shard in his hand as if it had betrayed him. The northern warriors murmured amongst themselves, unsure, their certainty eroded. Kalen stepped forward. He didn't look at me. His eyes were on Jerk, his voice calm, final, and imbued with the authority of the moment. "The ancestors have spoken again, Alpha Jerk. Through their oldest seat they speak of unity, not purity, of strength through inclusion, not isolation." He gestured to the now empty space on the wall. "The fracture was a memory of a wound long healed. The circle it shows is unbroken, forged stronger at the seam. This is the truth my Veilwalker has translated. This is the future the mountain endorses." He let the words hang in the stunned silence. "The North's grievances will be addressed in council with respect for tradition and with eyes to a shared future, but the threat of secession ends here, today." Jerk looked from Kalen to the throne to me to his own shaman. He had come with a magical indictment and found it overturned by a deeper magic. The wind had been ripped from his sails, his shoulders, always so square, slumped in defeat. He gave one last, long look at the throne, then at me, his expression unreadable, a mixture of bitterness, awe, and a reluctant, terrible respect. Without a word, he turned. He strode from the great hall, his retinue falling in behind him, the iron chest abandoned on the floor. The silent, absolute nature of his retreat was more powerful than any signed treaty. The moment the doors closed behind them, the hall erupted. Not in cheers, but in a massive, collective release of breath, a babble of conversation, shock, relief. I sank fully onto the throne, too weak to stand. The world swam. Through the haze I saw Kalen turn to me. The impassive mask was gone. In his stormy eyes was a look of such profound gratitude and respect that it stole what little breath I had left. He didn't approach. He simply placed his fist over his heart, a formal, deep gesture of allegiance, and bowed his head to me. And all around us, as the court saw their king's gesture, a slow, rippling wave of fists moved to hearts and heads dipped in my direction. Not to a king, not to a conqueror, to a healer, to a bridge. To the Veilwalker who had not chosen the path of blood but the harder path of truth, and in doing so had shown a fractured kingdom the image of its own wholeness. The hook was gone, the line was cast, and against all odds we had pulled ourselves back from the brink. Chapter 15, a new foundation. The days following the confrontation in the Great Hall passed in a strange, suspended quiet. The castle, which had vibrated with tension for weeks, seemed to exhale. The northern delegation had withdrawn to their quarters within the castle grounds, not to their mountains. They were not guests, but they were not prisoners either. They were consulting. The absolute silence from Jerk was more telling than any roar. I spent the first day in my quarters, sleeping a deep, dreamless sleep of utter exhaustion. When I awoke, the world felt different, lighter. The constant, gnawing pressure in my chest was gone. In its place was a hollow, aching space where the fear had lived, and a new, tender awareness of the silver armband and the gray stone pendant, no longer marks of a burden but badges of a path chosen and walked. Master Salon visited, bringing broth and a gentle, proud smile. You did more than translate stone, child, he said, patting my hand. You changed the language of the debate. They came with the grammar of division. You answered with the syntax of unity, a healer's work indeed. Ronan came next, his usual calm restored. He brought scrolls, draft proposals for the new council with the North, focusing on shared stewardship of borderlands, cultural exchanges, and a joint tribunal for disputes. The work begins now, he said, but his eyes were bright, the hard work of building. And you, Liana, will have a seat at that table. As Kaelin's voice of the old ways, an official title, if you want it, the offer was staggering, a political position, a voice. I was just beginning to understand my own voice. I need to think, I whispered. He nodded, understanding. There is time. Kaelin did not come. I heard he was in constant meetings with his advisors and, surprisingly, with the Northern Shaman privately. He was building on the opening I had created, weaving the fragile threads of possibility into something durable. On the third day I felt strong enough to walk. I didn't go to the gardens or the archives. I went to the Great Hall. It was empty save for 2 guards at the far doors. The noon light streamed in, clean and sharp, illuminating the dust motes and the empty throne. I walked to the dais but did not climb it. I stood before the throne, looking up at the carved wolves. Their amber eyes watched me back, no longer intimidating but familiar. Companions in a strange journey. Thank you, I said softly to the empty seat. The words were for the throne, for the mountain, for my mother whose journal had guided me, for the strange gift I had spent so long fearing. A presence filled the space behind me. I didn't need to turn. I knew his scent, snow-laden pine and dark earth. It doesn't get less imposing, does it? Kaelin said, his voice quiet in the vast space. He came to stand beside me, also looking up at the throne. No, I agreed, but it feels less alone, he nodded. We stood in a comfortable silence for a long moment, 2 people who had faced an abyss together and slowly stepped back from the edge. Jerk has agreed to formal negotiations, Kaelin said finally. He has stipulated that you be present, not as my healer, as the Veil Walker. He says he does not trust you, but he must respect the power that speaks through you. A faint, wry smile touched his lips. It is a start. And the shaman? I asked, confused, humbled, intrigued. He spends hours in the archives now, comparing your mother's symbols to his own lore. I believe he is trying to learn your syntax. Kaelin turned to look at me, his stormy eyes earnest. What you did, it was not a trick, it was a revelation. You showed us all that our history is not a cage, but a foundation. And a foundation can support many different kinds of houses. His words resonated deeply. That was exactly what I had felt in the labyrinth, in the throne, not a rigid past, but a living, adaptable bedrock. Ronan offered me a title, I said, looking at my hands. Voice of the old ways, and will you accept? He asked. There was no pressure in his tone, only curiosity. I took a deep breath, looking from the throne to the sunlight on the stone floor. I think I need to walk my own path for a while first. To understand this gift without the weight of a kingdom on every whisper, I need to learn before I can truly be a voice. I expected disappointment. Instead, his expression softened with something like admiration. Wisdom, he said simply. The throne recognized that in you too. He paused. Then what will you do? I will stay, I said, the decision firming as I spoke it. I will learn from Salon, I will study the archives, I will be your healer if you'll still have me, and I will attend the negotiations not as a voice but as a translator when needed. I met his gaze. I want to help build that new house, Kaelin, but I need to strengthen my own foundations first. A true, full smile broke across his face then, transforming the severe lines into something warm and alive. It was a rare sight, and it stole my breath. Then that is what you shall do. He reached into his tunic and pulled out a small, folded piece of parchment. A first lesson, perhaps. The northern shaman gave this to me for you. He would not say why. Puzzled, I took it. I unfolded the thick, rough parchment. On it was drawn a single symbol. It was not one I knew from my mother's journal. It was 2 circles, interlinked like chainmail with a single vertical line piercing through both their centers. At the bottom, in shaky, unpracticed script, were words, for the walker between. The symbol is called the Unbroken Weave. It is older than wolves or kings. We thought it lost. You made it seen again. I stared at the symbol, feeling its truth in my bones. The interlinked circles, north and south, past and future, strength and healing. The line through the center, the veil walker, the connector, the living stitch in the fabric. Tears, sudden and hot, pricked my eyes. It was acknowledgement from the most unlikely source. It was a name for what I was, from the very tradition that had sought to deny me. Kaelin saw my emotion. He didn't speak, he simply stood beside me, a steady, solid presence as I absorbed the gift. Finally, I folded the parchment and held it to my chest. I looked up at the throne one last time, then out the great windows to the sun-drenched mountains beyond. The story that began with a scared girl sitting on a king's chair had not ended with a grand coronation or a romantic vow. It had ended with a piece of parchment, a choice for patience, and a hard-won seat at a table where the future would be built, brick by careful brick. The war was averted. The fracture was healing. I was no longer a ghost, nor a pawn, nor a symbol. I was Liana Hayes, a healer, a veil walker, a woman who had found her truth in the sighing stone and had used it to remind a divided people of their unbroken weave. And as I stood there in the quiet hall, with the Alpha King at my side and a new symbol held close to my heart, I knew the most important chapter was not the one behind me, but the one I would begin to write tomorrow. Not with a shout but with a whisper, not with a sword but with a stitch. The hook of destiny was gone, replaced by the needle and thread of purpose, and for the first time in my life I was ready to begin sewing.